you share some of what you've told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
So keep going. What do I say? I speak to him every day. He's a good man, doing a lot. Been very unfairly treated by his country, I think. Very unfairly treated.
Have you given him any indication that you may seek to aid them more than you have already?
No, I haven't. So far, he's doing a good job. He has been treated very unfairly by his country. You know, he's a wartime president, and he's going through this nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Sounds like you got a good
agree
meeting
with him.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Thursday, June 19th, 2025. We recently discussed Detachment 201. Briefly, pointed to it in a previous show around just the shocking development that it was into context of the larger, Palantir overlap, technocracy. But I thought it was important that we went back through this today. Reese, I was on Shannon Joy's show today, and we were going to be touching on that, and ended up, just because the conversation was enjoyable, went a lot of different directions, almost my favorite. But I really wanted to make sure we went back to that so you didn't miss how important that was. Because it's a story that seems to, even from my coverage, falls to the wayside, because it almost feels like it's a marketing tactic or something that just, it almost doesn't feel as important as the rest of what's going on today. And maybe it's not. But I really wanted to start with that today because, in my opinion, this is a vivid, real, obvious example of what we've been warning about. And the problem with what we discuss around technocracy, or whatever you want to discuss it, the context of some technocratic kind of regime change or overtaking or transition for this country, a lot of it can be abstract. A lot of things that are very hard to define and identify. And for those that aren't really paying attention to it, can feel conspiracy theory or however you want to frame that. But this is an example of something that's impossible to ignore. The transition, the overlap to exactly what we're highlighting. In fact, from the very companies we're highlighting, suddenly having colonel status in the military. And not some side, not like a promotional thing, not some little ribbon there, get like a legitimate place in the military. I just think this is important not to miss. And we're going to touch on that and how it overlaps with everything we've been discussing for a long time, and what that kind of means for where we are, the overlap of those very people with the current Israeli agenda, working alongside a part of them ideologically, religiously, a lot of weird overlaps to all of this. And then how that, as we've gone over a lot, alarmingly, there's a word, I'm trying to look for a word that's worse than just weaves through, but just completely has infested the US government. And this is more than one thing, but very clearly something that everybody is beginning to call out, finally, especially the Republicans at this point, because of what's going on right now, because of what's been going on with the genocide, even going back to the COVID-19 conversation, because of a lot of the interesting overlaps of the health side of that with Israel and Pfizer, and a lot there. But today, the focal point being around the ongoing development of the war, the continuation of what they're doing elsewhere, how that overlaps with this surveillance conversation. And then we're going to go over a part today around we touched on this recently, but a little bit more around the MAGA division through the Iran point and how vivid that is, and the interesting statements made by Trump around that seem to just solidify exactly what a lot of us were highlighting, which is it's not really America first for many of them. It's simply Trump first, which, by the way, is not a left-right thing. It applies to the same partisan game. Let's just make it, it'd be Biden first for the other side of the conversation, not about the policy, but about the person. And, sure, these policies matter to many of them, but at the end of the day, they would choose to ignore the dangerous step, the wrong direction, the bad choice, in lieu of the team. And I think that's important. We're going to overlap again the point of all of that in the current cabinet and this government, and the influence of a foreign government that really just can't be denied at this point, and why that's so important to this conversation. And of course, the major point today, as well as getting updates about what's going on regarding Israel, the U.S., and Iran, and the ongoing attempted regime change. That's why the title is framed as the regime change two-step, because it's just the same old tactics, the same narratives, the same arguments. I'm even going to show you in a minute right before I went live, another post of the Israeli government saying Iran could make a nuclear missile in 15 days. It just doesn't change. Is that possible? Sure, of course it is. But the amount, it's being made fun of by CNN at this point. How many times they've said this, and yet every time it's false. So at this point, why would anybody take it at face value? But yet all the same people from all the same agendas are always they jump right back in and say, we knew it, they're making a bomb. And it's important to understand the lies around this, the history, as well as other parts that I've been touching on. The discussion of Iran and its history and the Operation Ajax regime change, Israel and the United States, the lies about the reality of the lives of Iranians in general. I'll point to an interview I did with Peter Santilli, which is a really great interview. And this one was from 2019. I talked to him. Good, interesting timing, by the way, for discussions we're going to highlight today around Iran murdering its own people. And, we're going to go through the lies and the truth of it all. Now, let's be clear. For those that may not be used to the show, or you're new to the show, my mindset is that these governments are not to be trusted. Left, right, up, down, Iran, Israel, the United States. They're not acting in the interest of people, in my opinion. Now, I'm jaded. I'm pessimistic when it comes to governments, because history shows you that. That doesn't mean we should ignore the possibility of something positive. But the point is that I'm not trying to take a side when it comes to these governments. I think they're all acting in their own self-interest and would lie as it suits those interests. But what's important is to highlight the lies within that and the truth within that. And what's important to see is that the U.S. government, as a matter of policy, as we should all see by now, lies about its adversaries, just like every other government for that matter. But from this point, while we're being driven to a war with this government and with the people in this country that both will ultimately probably benefit from at the end of the day, the reality is to understand where that truth is, and that there are people very unhappy in Iran. And there are people that are fighting to change the government, just like there's lots in this country doing the same. But that most Iranians would tell you they do not want anybody, including especially the U.S. and Israel, to stick their fingers into it and change based on their arguments about what they want. We'll talk about the hijab point and the lies around that, what stem from the religious overlaps, but from the regime change. And there's a lot more to the story around why people might do that. Yeah, and it's not to say that there's not problems there. Their government commits crimes like our government does. But to use these to manipulate for the interest of anybody other than Iranians is just important to understand. And we're going to go through this again today. There's going to be people, just like the conversation of Zionism and Israel, just like the conversation of Syria and Israel. The idea being that it's clear that there's people that will never allow the truth to break through, despite what we can now see. Syria is a great example. How long have we been telling you what the reality was? And now you have the same terrorist organization they up until recently told you was the group where they were fighting, who's now in control, or rather ostensibly, and Israel has bases and occupied areas and military rolling out, building settlements, and carrying out ethnic cleansing, which kind of seems to follow wherever they go. Now that has to, you think about the lies we were told about what that all was about. Now there's going to be an image I showed today that Syrian girl shared. The point is, this is why that was all happening, at least in one large part, because now the land bridge we've discussed and the ability to reinforce across these with that the area not taken, it stopped their ability to achieve, at least successfully the way we're seeing now, continue to do so. But we'll leave it there to start, but there is a lot to cover. Question everything is always the important thing to think about while we're being deceived by all these partisan sides and people that very clearly have interest in the outcome of what happens here. I also want to start by saying in general that there's a lot of people out there that are becoming exposed for, funding from this or manipulation from that. And it's like I say, I believe it's probably the majority of this field. And through that, it's interesting. I've seen comments about people referencing we will always get attacks. And you should consider what people have to say, question for yourself, but care about the facts. The point is, people that are over the target, which I believe we are, will always get attacks from people that want you not to look at it or that want to hide it for a certain agenda. If you look at what this platform is built on, from day one, we have been explicitly transparent about what runs this platform. My point is, there are people making ridiculous allegations about the shadowy funding behind this platform. This is easily one of the most transparent and basic platforms that are out there. The only thing that keeps this platform going are the direct donations from you through this platform and that you mail in. And then the what we get from things like Subscribestar and Buy Me a Coffee. That's it. All the same point, literally from you. We at one point, like for example, we've talked about Peter and Super You in the past. Somebody who I seriously was one of the greatest people that I knew in all of this, who really genuinely was trying to help people build their platforms, never asked for anything, never asked for any content. The point was because I believe in this person, tried to help him build for no benefit of my own, no money or any funding, build what he was building out as a new platform. He suspiciously died, whole nother story. My point was outside of that, where he was, I mean, it was at the time, it was like $1,000 a month just trying to help the platform. Other than that, there's literally nothing right now except you guys directly donating. There's no advertising revenue. There's no large donations. I mean, at most, we get $100 plus from some people that donate. I just want to make sure that's clear to people. Now, yes, question that. Prove me wrong if you think that's a lie. The reality is, if all the things out there, and there's plenty of us in the IMA, for example, or people that aren't, that I just think are also fantastic, who also have a similar model. But there's a lot of people out there who are trying to scream about everybody else who have the exact opposite. And I just want support. That doesn't mean they're immediately should be seen as guilty or wrong or dishonest, but recognize how important it is to see the difference. And that we survive based on your support for this platform alone. And that's it. So that note, thank you for all of your continued support for all that we've gone through and as we continue. And we do this for free. We put all this out here for free, the days of work and long-term effort, because we believe in it and we believe in you. So if you believe in the work, let us know. So I'd like to start with like I mentioned earlier, we had a great discussion with Shannon Joy today about a lot of different things, kind of went all over the place, and I plan to join her again. Good conversation. And the point was that we had mentioned it before, and had I known it was the actual screenshot, the image and the title, I would have made sure I went into it more, but we kind of danced around it. We didn't go into it in depth. And I believe she's been touching on her show as well. So I'm going to start with a point on that I think is very important. And I just want to shout the link out right there so you can check out the interview. Now, another point, these are a couple opening points I want you to see before we get into first a point about Fort Detrick, and then the point about the AI overlap, Palantir, and how that connects with Israel, but starting with the point I just showed you about Detachment 201. But Glenn makes this point that I just think is important to think about, especially in the context of the sort of MAGA division that's happening, which is not some ploy, it's not some secret manipulative Democrat effort. I mean, sure, those probably also exist. But the reality, as I was jokingly saying in a previous show, is that you don't need some ploy. These people are just not complete morons. They recognize that these things are not going the path that you promised. And then, you can wonder for yourself about Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson and what their intentions may be. My point is that maybe they're doing what they're doing now to gain clout in the future. I'm not sure. I can't decide. But my point is that what they're saying now is accurate. And they're saying that this MAGA is being divided because of Iran and because of Israel. And then they get incredibly turned on by all the people, or they get turned upon by all the people out there who just want to fight for one person, Trump or whoever the leader is. Despite what they're pointing out being transparently obvious. It's obvious what's happening. That, Stargate platform was not what you were promised. Going to war with Iran was the opposite of what you were promised. But people like Cat Turd and the rest will come out and attack anybody who goes against it, which just proves what we've been saying the entire time. How can you see Trump and everybody else just rapidly turn on Tucker Carlson, a leader of their movement, because he disagrees about a central part? Yes, but you're not allowed to have a different opinion. We're going to make a point about that today again. It just shows you, you can argue that, yes, maybe he hurt the movement, but what if that's actually his opinion? Are you arguing he should just not tell you his opinion because of team sports, politics? Yes, that's actually what they're arguing. It's interesting today. But on that note, Glenn says, it's been clear for months. Recognize how DC Drano on the Red, and who's talking about this for months, that we are never going to get real disclosure of the Epstein files, because the key unanswered question, was Epstein working for or with any foreign intelligence agencies, has to be hidden. Now, that's one major thing. I think he's right, but it also could be that Trump and other key people in both sides of the paradigm are completely culpable, guilty. I mean, it's just, the point is, how many people can act like this is going to change everything, this person versus that person? And here we are, and it's the same old story. He says the chance that we'll get the answer now is close to zero. Now, another point you might have missed, the Genius Bill, which we've touched on twice, I think, but not in too much depth, because the point was this bill is not as specific as some people try to make it, but it's very clearly a stepping stone towards the stablecoin CBDC point. Now, that may not make sense to you if you haven't understood the point of the stablecoin overlap, because there was the central bank digital currency point is very clear and important, and that it became like the we're going to not allow that point from Trump. And they act like that was a saving grace, except the point was they leaned into the stablecoin version. Not the same thing, but exponentially worse, according to Catherine and Mark Goodwin and plenty of others that have researched this quite a bit. And so the point was that's a very clear problem with what they're leaning into. And then this bill came around, which then basically laid out it paved the way for specifically the stablecoin overlap to the CBDC. And it passed while people we were all rightly paying attention to a lot of other things. Important to think about. A lot of steps like this are happening that if they were under Biden, they would get a lot more attention. Other opening point that I didn't want you to miss, not necessarily related other than the abstract point of what globalism, North American Union, promises and lies, or grifting, or other trolling points on Twitter that then become real, right? Where Pentagon shifts Greenland to U.S. Northern Command in shakeup. I mean, this just seems like transparent. What's the right word for it? Technically, right now, this is just like a control area change. But it is very clearly an effort to sort of absorb this into its field of control. And that's the point. This is on the 17th. And it simply says the Pentagon is redrawing its military combatant command responsible for defending the U.S. homeland to include Greenland as the Trump administration signals it wants control of the Danish territory. Just because it wants that, not like it has a legal right to that or it has any other justifiable reason, just wants it. Right, and I'm sure they clearly have a agenda, military and whatever else they're not going to get into about it. But it's just dishonest. This is exactly who we're dealing with, and this is just the U.S. government, left and right. It says this change will strengthen the joint forces' ability to defend the U.S. homeland, which is always the argument. So we can take what we want as long as we can rationalize it in the interest of what we say you should want, which usually doesn't mean that anyway. And really, what it means is probably more threat to you because of what they do. Contributing to a more robust defense of the Western Hemisphere and deepening relationships with Arctic allies and partners, blah, blah, blah. It says the adjustment will shift responsibility for Greenland from U.S. European Command to U.S. Northern Command, in their eyes anyway. It's not like they voted for this or that Denmark gave this up. This is still Denmark's control. It says aligning Greenland with NORTHCOM will mean that it's treated as not as an outpost, but as a cornerstone of U.S. security posture. So give it a year or maybe a month. They'll simply argue that due to this current reality, now we have to take it because of national security. This is just a stepping stone in them very rapidly justifying what they're just going to take. That said, it says Ferguson warned that the shift risked alienating European allies and that Denmark shouldn't be sidelined amid realignment. Oh, very kind of you. Sideline. Imagine this was Denmark saying, we're just going to absorb Florida into our field of control. But don't worry, we're not going to sideline the U.S. with Florida. Seems ridiculous. Now, let's be clear. Denmark is not the same. We're talking Denmark Greenland is not the same. It's different landmass. Clearly, it's more closer connected Canada to the United States. It just doesn't change the current legal reality. And it says, since returning to office, Donald Trump has repeatedly said that the U.S. should control the territory, now a semi-autonomous part of Denmark. It says, one way or another, we're going to get it, Trump says. And now here we are, right? It's just very transparent. Now it says, still, while testifying before the House last week, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth refused to rule out that the U.S. may use force to take Greenland, even when encouraged by Republicans to clarify. Just worthy of note, right? I mean, this is not connected to anything else really today, but that seems like a ridiculous, imperialistic, just, colonial, you call it whatever you want. This is the opposite of what we frame ourselves as in this country. But it's really what this country, the government has been. I'll include the show we did on January 8th, 2025. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorsed North American Union. In particular, the ones that we've been screaming about this as a problem and globalism as a problem. And then the moment it really begins, point anywhere else, which is just showing you who the manipulators are out there. Now, on another interesting note, by the way, that this is one to note to earmark for later. I get the sense that this will come back into play should they want it to, or maybe this is already the beginning of something. But this is from the conservative platform Daily Beast. Ice Barbie visited biohazard lab. Can you guess which one? With RFK Jr. before hospitalization. I mean, so this is Fort Detrick. Surprise, surprise. And let's not forget, Fort Detrick, for what, the seventh, eighth time, shut down due to safety concerns in April of 2025. That's exactly what happened before the last COVID-19 PSYOP. Remember, they shut down. They had weird, all the different surrounding areas suddenly had the weird pneumonia, and the nursing homes had the weird pneumonia. Everyone was dying, and the ground glass opacity, and then they carried over to the military games. Now, let's not forget how much we've been lied to about and how much of a psyop this really was, but recognizing the timing and what they're saying is interesting. But it says Kristi Noem was hospitalized, which, by the way, why is she even going to this? It just doesn't make any sense to me with what her, I mean, realistically, whatever her position, I don't think she's in this, the intellect to do what we're talking about here. But either way, it just makes sense that she would be the one to go to this, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, I know the argument of the government job, but I just think that what we're discussing here is a check, a routine dynamic for the idea that they claim there was a safety issue. You have the head of HHS going, Kristi Noem was hospitalized for an allergic reaction, they say. An allergic reaction. One day after RFK Jr., which it could be. It could just be that she literally had some allergies and they used this to make this story something. So consider all perspectives on it. But it says, and shared a photo of them visiting the biosafety lab that was temporarily shut down due to safety concerns on Tuesday. Noem was taken to the hospital by ambulance for allergic reaction, which I don't, as far as I can tell, there's not been a follow-up. It's funny, why wouldn't they go, oh, it turned out to be this? I haven't heard much about that. That's on Tuesday. Now it says, it's not clear what prompted the allergic reaction, and there's nothing to suggest the incident was anything more than a bizarre coincidence. Then it's an interesting thing to report. Here they are. And Rand Paul, by the way. The integrated research facility at Fort Detrick studies viruses causing high consequence disease, which it's a BSL-4. So at least there are both areas. I think there's a 3 and a 4 area in the compound. And it says such as Ebola, SARS-CoV-2, according to its site, or whatever we want to argue those are. One of its focus areas is to mitigate major public health events related to emerging or re-emerging infectious diseases or biological weapons attacks. So gain of function. Yes, that's what we're talking about. So interesting timing. So could be nothing. Could be a coincidence. Could be, just literally propaganda, or it could be the stepping stones for something else. I want to point out that let's not forget, since they came into power, as we talked about here, gain of function head fake. They've brought gain of function back. Let's be doubly clear. It never went away. That's the point. Whether they call it EPPP research or whatever else, it never technically stopped, even from Trump's last administration. We made this point right in the beginning. We were proving this, as a lot of us did. But let's not forget the transition on May 5th, where they stated this publicly as if they stopped gain of function. But what they really did was enshrine it going forward. That was the interesting part about this. And you can read the exact executive order for yourself. And even Grok says, nope, not fully banned. It simply has limits. And what it says in the actual document they wrote out, that they're going to become the leaders in this type that they're now doing. So basically just enshrine the continuation of gain of function under the guise that they're only doing the right kinds. That was actually what happened. And everyone from Elon to Robert Mueller, everybody came out and said, yay, they stopped gain of function. They were either lying or they didn't read it, or any variation therein. I just found that very interesting. And in Common Sense here, it says they did not ban it in general. They just the federal funding. So even within that argument of the limited version, even that was only about federal funding, is the point she's making. And saying so Bill Gates or anybody could take USAID money, launder it, then privately fund gain of function. Historically, that's been happening as well. So all of this is important to consider, that they go to this on the 17th or the day before, or the days before. She gets some kind of weird thing, goes to the hospital. As far as I could tell, there's no serious side. It is the 19th, so who knows? She appears to be fine as far as I can tell right now. And I'll include this as well, revisiting Fort Detrick, vaping overlap, and the whole bigger picture of how this ties back into a lot. There's a lot of good information here around Fort Detrick and how it ties in. And this is, and on top of that, right now, or rather the days following. So this is the 18th. Okay, so the days after this all happens, could just be coincidence. It says, what to know about the COVID variant that may cause razor blade, sore throat, Daily Mail, COVID alert, kept catchy Nimbus variant doubles in just 1 month, or nothing. Like I say, don't do their work for them. Don't hype all this just because they point to it. But the timing seems interesting to me, right? So again, like I said, file away for if and when. But I do find this to be relevant, and how there's all the moving parts for something they may want to come. Think of it like this, for fun, just theorizing that they hate, even though the point is it could be completely nonsensical, but interesting to think about whether somebody could have made this happen using the blind, kind of mindless Trump people that have been put in these positions that think they're in the know but aren't. Pretty much all the government, in my mind, the people we see, and then allow them to create this and then blame it on them. And we've talked about the overlap of Trump in the past, where you can put him there and then blame everything collapsing at his feet. Very well could be the same point. But again, enough theorizing, just interesting to think about. We'll leave that there for future conversations. Okay, so let's talk about this general point. And I really want to come back to this larger idea, just to keep it in your mind, the idea, the possibility. There's a lot, and like we said before, consider any of them. The idea that any government, China, the UK, might have an interest in sort of subverting power from somebody they see as their, whether ally or adversary, that simply, is more powerful. It's incredible to think we've ever got to a point to where anyone would just outright dismiss something like that. History is riddled with stuff just like, in fact, I mean, go to like the Game of Thrones series. Like, that's the point of the analogy, that it's always this ongoing, never-ending, devious game of struggling for inches of power. That's what this, at the end of the day, that is what we're really dealing with. As much as we don't want to pretend that's the case, we'd like to give them all this virtuous coats. Oh, he has the American flag on. Oh, he's got the white coat. Oh, he's a dog. Oh, he's a journalist, so he's the honest one. None of that's real. Some of them can be, but the assumption that people in position just are therefore virtuous is just mindlessly wrong. It's naive. So the reality is, history has shown us what we're dealing with when it comes to power structures, governments in particular. So this discussion on November 30th, 2024 was called the New Trump Administration. And to be clear, it's not just this one, but this was seemingly a very clear inflection point, and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. A good starting point for that idea, if you haven't thought about this before. But so taking that in mind, the idea of all these things coming together, let's talk about, the AI direction, but how this overlaps with Detachment 201, Palantir, Israel, and the larger agenda that seems to be rolling out right now. And I'll include, this was one we just talked about, the Trump's leaked AI government plans. I'm including the show just because I want to point to that as well, which is right here. And I'm not going to go over it again, but you guys want to check it out. The article's included. Trump's administration's whole of government AI plans leaked on GitHub. And in fact, they at the end of the article, it says updated up top, they have a live version that they actually found. So it was basically, and I'll show you this really quickly in case you didn't see it in the last show. If you type in ai.gov, it reloads back to the White House page. And this is all easily verifiable. We went over in the last show that ai.gov, it's right here, an archive version of it, of the original website. The page is meant to be sort of this transitional page to turn in basically all of government into AI processes, if not entirely. It's not a secret. And we've been telling you this for a very long time. And on top of that, the archive I was telling you of this whole thing they tried to hide actually just got shoved into a different archive. It may be gone by now, but when they wrote this, they still had a version and the archive page. To me, this is one major piece of where this goes. Surprised I didn't remember to grab this one, which I will now. Same kind of conversation, but the extension of it. This was the show about specifically the impending future of not AI governance, like being governed by it, but AI government. So basically the entity you're dealing with is an AI dynamic. Now, that's just hypothetical, but I do believe that's where they're aiming and may well be already attempted. And the point is, who controls the AI? So that's included. This is the direction we're talking about. So let's discuss all of that in the context of literally creating technocracy in uniform. Like taking exactly what we're worried about. So even more specifically, Palantir leaders and making them colonels in the military. How does that not just put a shining, like that is, you could not make a better example for what I've been trying to warn about than that right there. I mean, other than maybe making them the president. I mean, think about how obvious this is. So if you haven't seen this already, the Army's newest recruits, Wall Street Journal writes, tech execs from Meta, OpenAI, and more brought into the military, given uniforms, literal credentials, if you will, whatever the right term would be there. This is I don't want to say the beginning, but a really physical, visible example of that incestuous overlap. And I mean, you could think about it in a lot of different ways. Just the most basic for people to grasp is just Silicon Valley. People in tech taking power. So subverting power from what you argue, which is a whole other conversation, but for not to confuse it today, is your ability to put people in power, your vote, your democracy. So if you believe that's the way this works, this is them subverting that. And I'm going to show you what I mean if you haven't thought about this before. If you put these people in positions of power and you start to suddenly warp this into a dynamic where it's about what they ultimately perceive as best for the future of the people of this country or the planet, and they act unilaterally through their power, their money, their technology, and the rest of it's all a sideshow, then you're being subverted. So first, let's talk about this. This is... And the nerd brigade, the article calls it, is reporting for duty. Now it says they probably, and I got to be honest too, just on that point, Do not allow them to make this benign. Acting like it's just a couple of nerds who just want to be involved. Like, the way that a lot of these articles seem to sort of downplay the severity of what this is and the amount of power that comes along with it, even the power they have before they even take this position. It says they probably won't win any push-up contests, things like that, and might not be sharpshooters. Yet for part of the year, a set of brainy Silicon Valley executives will trade their corporate branded vests for U.S. Army Reserve uniforms because they know a heck of a lot about artificial intelligence. That's what they wrote. The chief technology officers from Palantir and Meta Platforms, and they're Shyam Sankar and Andrew Bosworth, respectively, will join Kevin Weil and Bob McGrew of OpenAI pedigree to make up the inaugural cohort of the new Army Innovation Corps. Now, I was going to put OpenAI in the image today, too. I just couldn't find something that wasn't as large and clunky. But now it goes on to say, Bosworth and Meta chief executive Mark Zuckerberg supported his decision to join the reserve. As if it was, that's a weird way to write that, right? As if this was like his unilateral decision to just join the military. Clearly, there would be more involvement here. Mark Zuckerberg, as the head of the company, would ultimately be somewhat involved. It's almost like the way they're trying to frame it is like this act of like somebody who quits their job and joins the military when a war starts. That's how they're trying to make this feel. Like they're, breaking away from Silicon Valley to help the country. And this is a major point here. This is what Alex Karp and Andreessen and a lot of them have been pushing. Like this is some new tech revolution. Like not even tech makes it sound different. Like this is some new revolution through technology, or rather just through them and this new, the oligarchy here to save you from the bad oligarchy. That's the mindset they have. Who knows if they believe it? I don't think they do at the end of the day. Now it says, there's a lot of patriotism that has been under the covers that I think is coming to light in the Valley. They're trying to frame this as some sort of, they're the new patriots breaking through from a group that has been pretty it's been like the antithesis. It's been like to overlap with government and even like allowing merchants of death types, Lockheed Martin, or these two, working with groups like that has almost always been a very clear, thou shalt not pass kind of line for Silicon Valley, at least on the surface. And really, I argue, and I say it like that because I think they want their employees to feel that way. We saw the pushback from Google and Amazon and Palantir from their employees when they found out they were doing all these things, that was somehow a moral problem for them, because it was. So this point is, it's kind of always been there. Now what they're trying to do is kind of spin this around and frame it something, that it works better for them. Like this is now what you're supposed to be doing, as opposed to the contradiction of what the moral logic of the past was. It says the tech recruits will be sworn in as uniformed officers, so legitimately, in a public ceremony. And I believe this was written on the 13th. Let me see what the date was so I don't misinform you here. So if it was the 13th, I was going to look at the calendar so I see what days those are. Okay, so the 13th, they said we sworn on Friday. Yeah, so I guess that is tomorrow. It looks like tomorrow is what they're discussing right there. This will be interesting to see. If that is the case and it wasn't last week, which that means they probably would have said today instead of Friday, that I'd like to see what this goes through. If there's fanfare, if there's like no acknowledgement of it, I think this will give you an indication of what if there's like no coverage at all, I think that says something. And it says the day before the Army's 250th birthday. Meta and OpenAI adjust. Oh, maybe it was the last. Yeah, you know what? It does say updated June 13th. So maybe this was written on the 12th. See, that's why I hate that. I hate and they know better than this. They just don't care. All these mainstream platforms that just alter things in the article. You've heard me cry about that before. It kills me because they change things and just go update it. And then no one holds them accountable for what they alter, and no one even knows. You publish an article or you post it thinking you're referencing a point they later took out, Anyway, so it does say the birthday. So I imagine that was last week. So again, I didn't see much fanfare about it. If that is the case, I think that says something. This would be something they would want you to know about if it was something they were really promoting as usual. It says Meta and OpenAI adjusted their policies to work more with the military last year. Recently, which is just strange in and of itself, right? Like the idea that these are, it's AI, social media, or rather we know it's more than that in regard to Meta, but the idea that they have been very clearly creating divides there. And on top of that, let's think about it in the government context. And social media, for that matter, from Meta, and the idea that now you're working with the government. So now literally you are state censorship, even though it always has been, right? There's so many interesting overlaps. To me, this is kind of the mask coming off for what's already been there. Adjusted their policies to work more with the military. Now, as recently, they each joined with the weapons maker Anduril, of course. Another Palantir overlap in the same inner circle, these same people, Palmer Luckey and all the rest of these people. That's the same kind of AI blob, Palantir genocide overlap. I mean, it really is this inner circle that's tied right to Donald Trump's inner circle. And they then tap into all the moving parts of everything we're talking about. And it says, of course, they each joined with the makers of Anduril Industries to develop products for the Pentagon. So all of them are now developing weapon systems or somewhere connected to that, which is, again, not really it's maybe new to you, but it's not new. Palantir, of course, has been involved in national security work for 2 decades, which is interesting to say like that. Almost as if, because you didn't come out with a point that says that it's almost as if they're trying to get ahead of your argument that Palantir is the problem. Because, they sense people's concern. So even they're writing it as, but Palantir's been doing it for decades without even a preface. I just want you to find that interesting. Point, yes, Palantir's been around a long time, but what they're doing today is unprecedented in regard to the removing of siloed information, using it all, training these models. I'm going to get to in a second their own documents, as much as they downplay even Trump or even Jones trying to tell you it's some small operation and the left manipulates. It's incredible that what they're willing to make themselves look that stupid to hide this, or they're that stupid. Because the reality is, even you'll look at their own documents. They have more revenue than any other of these major companies. There's so much more going on than they'll want you to see. Palantir has been involved in a national security work for decades. It has AI and data projects with the Army worth potentially more than $1 billion. Many in Silicon Valley assert their cutting-edge know-how can equip the military for a conflict with a tech-powerful adversary like China. That's what it's all pointed at least on the surface, while profiting the tech sector. For the Army, the deepening ties can help it prepare for the wars of the future. They are expected to be, this is so frustrating that this has become like a foregone conclusion. A lot of people used to argue that the whole point was to not have that be the reality, but the way that they're building this, the argument is this is always forever the case. You can't take the might makes right or peace through strength mindset and then act like, so at what point do we get to this peace level where because you've been so strength and military and violent that suddenly people stop wanting to push back? Because the reality is that never, ever happens. You have people that grow up recognizing you stole from them. They go back. That's not the path to peace. And a lot of wise people have said that in the past. And at least the government used to pretend they knew that. They never wanted that, but they knew that we did. So they always pretended that was the goal, right? We're not going to invade other countries and force them to act like we do. But they did, just like Trump did, like Biden did, like they all do. And so now the point is, well, we know it's going to be coming. China's getting worse and they're building this. Their AI is going to be strong. So we have to do it first. So maybe the point is that's happening. Maybe the point is it's inevitable, but shouldn't we at least do what we could to try to not let that be the case? The idea that foregone conclusion is we need to live in some military AI tech dominated control structure to stop the other bad guys. The idea it's inevitable is insane to me, but secondarily, well, then that means you're creating the problem to stop them from being the problem. So we're just accepting the U.S. controlled problem because it just seems like you're literally creating what we're running from because you claim they're going to do it first. Anyway, for the Army, this deepening ties can help it prepare for the wars of the future. They're expected to be waged in part with ground robots and drones and rely on networks of sensors and artificial intelligence to coordinate it all. It's not what I want. Quote, we need to go faster. And that's exactly what they're doing here, said General Randy George, the Army's chief of staff. Right, is that what we all feel? Rush quicker, run headlong into the thing we barely understand? Quick, because China's doing it. This just can't be seen as logic, guys. The Army in a show of its own geekiness, they write. A lot of that's in the article, kind of making it seem, benign, has dubbed the tech reservist program Detachment 201. The moniker refers to the Hypertext Transfer Protocol status code 201, sort of like Event 201, which indicates the creation of a new resource on a server. I found that sort of interesting, right? The idea that we're talking about the beginning of something new. Sort of like, if Event 201 was something new, you could think about it in that context, that essentially it was the creation of a new paradigm. It's interesting they choose the same kind of overlap. Now it says, then it says Detachment 201 is the first deployment of tech elites. That's what they're calling it. The first attack deployment of tech elites. Well, what is technocracy? It's the elitists of the tech the tech field of the respective tech entities, or rather, not just technology, but like engineers and scientists. And so it's just interesting that they're framing it as exactly what the definition is of what we're discussing. And it says Bryant, Parmeter, the Pentagon's chief management officer, who has been leading the creation of a tech reservist program since last year, is pushing for the services in the armed forces to follow the Army. Right. So great. So Marines and Navy, you see where this goes, guys. This is the beginning, in my opinion. It says each will carry the rank of lieutenant colonel. That's not something to sneeze at, guys. That's wild to me. And it says they will have more flexibility than the average reservist to work remotely and what is that? Asynchronously, and will be spared basic training. Well, that seems ridiculous to me. So you're going to give them a lieutenant colonel rank, and they don't even have to go through basic training? Like that this is special treatment. Why? It says teach soldiers how to use AI-powered systems or use health data to improve fitness. So just the same things we seem to be jammed in everywhere right now. Even Trump's mobile phone is about telehealth. So much overlap. Also, the executive, and by the way, we're going to get on that more in the coming show. There's inklings out there that apparently Trump's phone might be secretly made in China, and they put it together here. I'm going to wait for more information to come back to it, but I feel something with that seems off. But it says also the executives will advise the service on acquiring more commercial technology. They will help the Defense Department recruit other high-tech whizzes. Great. So this is where it's going, the transition. The recruits won't work on because you have to realize, guys, if we get away from kinetic warfare and it's drones and robots, well, that's what they want. They want people that, this is the transition into that reality. The recruits won't work on projects involving their employers, George said, and will be firewalled from sharing information with the employers, or participating in projects that could provide them with their companies and financial gain. Yeah, right. Does anybody believe that for a second? Every single time they ever make statements like this about your data and COVID-19, or what they'll allow, or Trump and his companies, or Biden and his company, or Obama, every single time they get shown to be lying. Right now, more than I've ever seen, Trump seems to be profiteering after everything they can make through, in his presidency, they're rolling out different Trump products. When have you ever seen this before? Now, let's be clear. It's not unique. They're all profiteering and lying. It just seems he's gone, mask off entirely. The point is, these people working for Palantir, Anduril, OpenAI, Meta, are you really going to pretend they won't share information that would benefit them versus other companies? It's insane. And of course, the information they have is already the highest level. So this is a problem for me. The reservists must complete physical fitness tests and marksmanship training. Great. So Gray Zone covered this as well. This was yesterday this came out. And it's simply to add to that, it says 4 ultra-wealthy executives from top tech companies were sworn into the unit ahead of President Trump's heavily promoted military parade. Okay, that confirms it. So it was technically last Friday, which was itself sponsored by Palantir. Surprise, surprise. The Army's top spokesman declared the Detachment 201 was, quote, being created to bring in tech innovation executive leaders to help the Army with the recruitment and the subsequent training of tech-focused people. Now, it says Palantir is by far the S&P 500's top-performing stock of the year, which, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others invested in them before. There's always that level of it. It's not unique to left or right. It's just your government. And it says, thanks in large part to the gargantuan contracts it has raked in from the Trump administration. According to the company's founder, Alex Karp, Palantir, quote, is here to disrupt, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies, and on occasion, kill them. Quote, and then it goes on to say, shares of the dystopian data firm, which is named after the all-seeing orb, Palantir, used by the evil wizard Sauron to surveil Middle Earth in The Lord of the Rings, skyrocketed to an all-time high following Israel's unprovoked assault on Iran. So that shows you right there. The thing that nobody wants and everyone's calling out is gaining them all money. There's not a better example to show you the disparity between what we want and what they want. And it says, elsewhere, Karp has eagerly embraced the model of disaster capitalism, remarking, quote, bad times are very good for Palantir because we build products that are built for danger. And there you go. So you can't for 1 second ask yourself whether they might lean into, exaggerate, exacerbate the problem that we don't want because that's where they gain. That's where they get better. They gain money. They gain control. So maybe make wars to make that happen, or maybe elongate them, or, any number of things. Guys, this is what we're talking about. If you can't think about that, then you're either blinded by partisanship or you don't understand history. Now it says, in recent years, Palantir has come to dominate the Western information sphere and now enjoys unfettered access to the sensitive data of citizens, to your data listening right now, in countries from the US to the UK. With customers including the Department of Defense, CIA, NSA, FBI, ICE, and the Special Operations Command, Palantir has become a one-stop shop for weaponized AI-based data analysis. Very important. Now, let's not forget on a side note that in regard to Ukraine even, which we won't touch on today, Palantir provides the tech, Anduril provides the drones. That's what they're using. So all of this hype about the drones and how that was being used. Now, the U.S. and these companies were acutely involved in all that. So we're being manufactured every step of the way here, in my opinion. Goes on to say, Palantir has become, and then it goes, amid the ruins of the national security state's obsessive search for enemies overseas, Palantir built a reputation for being both user-friendly and slavishly obedient to the military establishment. Quote, if you do not feel comfortable supporting the legitimate efforts of America and its allies in the context of war, don't join Palantir, says Karp. I mean, that's just shameless, guys. Like, so you're telling me the U.S. never has illegitimate interests? The government? I mean, are you aware of our own history? Are you aware of 30 seconds ago? Are you aware of the ongoing genocide? Oh, he is, though. He supports it. So when they're telling you that you either support what the U.S. government's doing right now, or you are not on their team, think about that. I mean, just realize, and if these people are suddenly working their way into government, not because you elected them, where do you see this going? The Palantir executive pointed to exploding pagers. He did. And long-distance drone strikes from the shipping containers. That's all these overlap. That's both Israel in Iran, where it turned out they had, false flag level stuff going on, where they had embedded things that were already there that they broke out. Also in Ukraine. Doing that in regard to coming out of these containers and bombing in Russia. They're the ones changing the field of war. They're the ones supporting it. And he points to one of the most textbook examples of terrorism I've ever seen in my life, the pager attack. And points to that, just like Israel does, as a successful model. That should terrify everybody, realizing what we're dealing with, what they're building, and the fact that right now, any one of those tech pagers or phones or anything could be in your hand right now, and you wouldn't know. Those pagers, they claim, were there for 10 years in Israel or in Lebanon. 10 years. 75% of them were women and children. That's what he wants you to think is a positive thing. He says, exploding pagers, long-distance drone strikes from shipping containers as attacks, which, quote, prove that technology has once again changed the battlefield and that our military has to change with it. So you realize he's not pointing to some anomaly. He's pointing to what they have allowed to change and then using that change as the rationale for why we need to change. But we already did change. You're the ones doing it. So this is called problem, reaction, solution. They're driving you into it. They are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. They changed the field. Now they're pointing to that change as why we need to change. They're causing it. It says, and this, think about that as they frame their adversaries as the one doing it all when they're literally the ones putting it in their hands. It says, with their newly minted lieutenant colonels in a world away, Palantir's corporate office corps will not be rallying the troops for the next war, but safely ensconced behind their digital curtain. They'll be watching and talking the next generation of nerds into signing up too. Let's not forget who is working with them and doing this. The strategic partnership with the United States, Israel, UK, all of them in the midst of a genocide. 972 Magazine wrote 2 different articles about this exact conversation and what they're using this for. One of them was about people, a mass assassination factory inside Israel's calculated bombing of Gaza. And one of them, I think it's the other way around, one of them was about buildings. Either way, this was indiscriminate, as plenty of experts, or rather whistleblowers, told you. And there's many examples of this. People that have spoke up and said, we're killing innocent people. Here's one example of a whistleblower.
Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about the reality he says he witnessed.
What kind of stuff would they say?
There are no uninvolved, only unarmed. This is something that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life.
Yep. And that's one of, I think, at least 8 different times. They've covered it. I think there was even one from corporate media where IDF members have come out and said, this is what we're doing. We're killing innocent people. And there's also 100,000 examples on video, 50 different doctors telling you on the record they're shooting innocent children. I watched it with my own eyes. I saw them execute doctors in front of the building. I saw no Hamas members in any building we've ever been in this entire time. All of them. Every single one of them. It's insane. Right now we are being driven into this by the villains, guys. That's not to say everything is good versus evil, but if you can't objectively recognize the people who are okay, who are blithely okay with people murdering children in real time, starving entire populations in real time, and you're taking that side, then you're part of the problem. Here is Palantir's own page, the Defense Reformation. Now, I only want to point out a couple things. It's a long document, but it's worth your time to look at the way they view the world. So this was written by the guy who's now in the military, Shyam Sankar, Palantir CTO. He's now currently a lieutenant colonel in the military. He wrote this October 31st, 2024. And it says, as a nation, we are in an undeclared state of emergency. Great. Around 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. Now, see, we're starting from the first sentence in this document with a blatant lie that you can quite frankly prove easier than anything. Because there was international observers. There was U.S. entities that were there that admitted that Crimea voted to become part of Russia through a referendum with the vast majority, over 90%. And no one even denies this today in regard to the population, because you can see that the Azov movement has been bombing Crimea as well as the Donbass. And that's why they want to pull away, because they are they are far more Russian speaking than the people in the Azov movement in Ukraine, who are Nazi elements and neo-Nazis and funded by Israel and the United States going back decades. It's easy to prove. I've done a lot of coverage on it. The point being is simply that was something you can prove, that Crimea was it was a referendum when they wanted to leave and join Russia. Now, that's not to say Russia's good guy. They're not breaking the laws. It's just an obvious fact. And our governments can't be even that basically honest about it because it's important for their agenda. So, and next, Crimea, he starts with, China militarized the Spratly Island in the South China Sea. This conversation is so frustrating. The idea that somehow everybody else has the right, like, look, whether or not you think it's okay for any government to militarize any island that they have control over, that's a different conversation. The U.S. does that everywhere, from Puerto Rico. I mean, you could Hawaii. That's what they did. What do you think? There's what, 3 military bases or 2 on Hawaii? Or in Oahu, I mean. So the bottom line is, for them to militarize areas they have control over, or the U.S. tries to sail through an area they claim is controlled by China, and they call them, trying to control the world. The point is, the U.S. does all the same things, but simply that is to highlight something that they act like as a problem because it's something they want to use to highlight, some unique aspect. No, the U.S. militarizes everything it touches all around the world, more bases than anybody. Now, it's not to say because they do it, it's okay, right? It's the same point. It's not, if they're both doing it and it's bad, they're both bad, okay? The point in this context is simply them highlighting things that are simply benign in the context of what everyone does, or Iran was allowed to pursue the bomb. Oh, yeah? I mean, really? Are we at this point still where we continue to find that? Right now, it's falling apart. Even Tulsi Gabbard recently said it again for the 15th time, and Trump is now attacking her for it, which we'll talk about in a minute. That's the first sentence, guys. This is the ideology guiding this guy who's wildly powerful, wildly influential, who is one element of a very clear technological overtaking, has now joined the military. And it says a decade later, we have had more than 300 attacks on U.S. bases by Iran. Think about how silly that is to even say. Now, I don't know of a single attack by Iran that was not in response or because of what the U.S. or Israel have been doing, and they bombed some location in Iraq. And then what do we keep hearing? Well, not a single person was killed. Weirdly enough, there was 100 different traumatic brain injuries, so I think that was a lie. But either way, they downplay it, and they point to it as a major problem. So what's the difference? You telling me the U.S. and Israel don't bomb bases or anything? Well, they're constantly doing this. They're constantly occupying countries. Israel just unilaterally murdered and bombed a whole bunch of stuff in Iran before they responded. My point is just this blind idea that somehow anything the U.S. does is good and virtuous, and anything they do, even if it's exactly what they just did, they're the evil terrorist. 1,200 people slaughtered in a pogrom in Israel. Are we really still playing this game? You mean what was it? 1,134 is what it ended up with, and more than half of those were people that were killed by Israel, and most of them were actually IDF members. These people are insanely dishonest, or that's stupid, and I don't think they're stupid. Million casualties of brutal combat in Ukraine. Unprecedented tempo of the CCP Phase 0 operations in Taiwan Strait. My God. And it goes on to say, this is a hot Cold War too. The West has empirically lost deterrence. We must respond, says the weapons manufacturer AI company, the defense contractor, right? We need more deterrence. Yeah, gee, that doesn't sound like a self-promotion. We have a peer adversary, China. So their whole game is to build up toward the China eventuality, which is what our government's been talking about for a long time. I want you just to recognize these people are not acting with, one, what Americans want, and two, in the interest of peace. The exact opposite. Alex Karp literally wrote the book, The Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and the Future of the West. Now it says, from Palantir co-founder, one of the tech's boldest thinkers, says the mainstream. Here's what Grok had to say about it. The core point of Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and Future of the West by Alex Karp is a critique of Silicon Valley's shift away from ambitious, nation-serving technological innovation. So basically becoming an ambiguous blur of the government. So fascism. So they're literally arguing for fascism. You understand? That's a tenet of fascism. The blurry line between corporations and the government. That's exactly what they're doing. Toward consumer-driven, trivial pursuits like social media. Well, sure, you're not going to get an argument from me that this was about, but let's also point out that those weren't just trivial. They may be to average people, but social media was a government operation in a large way. But it says the authors argue that this complacency, which is not what we're dealing with, guys. They're trying to use the appearance they've given themselves, despite the reality being overlap with the government, to then use that appearance to drive you into accepting what they've always already been doing, in my opinion. This is coupled with intellectual fragility and a lack of shared purpose in the West, as in the governments, you understand, threatens the U.S. and its allies' global technological geopolitical dominance. Ask yourself why we feel the need to have to dominate these fields. Only reason they want you to think that makes sense is because they say that's what they're going to do first. If we don't do it first, they're going to do it. Then they'll control us. Well, maybe, but I sure as hell think it's worth trying to fight towards an equal footing for the world where we're not all. But see, the idea is they've been drilled into people's minds that some of these people are lesser than, right? Some are less equal than others. Is the way you would go from Orwell. The point is, they really want you to think the Iranians and the Russians, the Chinese are just evil, villain, monster terrorists. That if you let them to their own devices, they'll kill us all. They are the problem. Anybody out there espousing those ideas are the ones that are creating that in the world. That's my opinion. The bottom line is, especially in the emerging AI race, they advocate for a renewed partnership between the tech industry and the government. That's fascism, guys. That's literally what they're arguing for. That's what Andreessen, the rest on Joe Rogan, they're floating the acceptance of exactly what we're fighting, including, in particular, conservatives, through what they thought Trump was going to do. They just call it something else. Here's Alex Karp. Say it himself.
Americans are the most loving, God-fearing, fair, least discriminatory people on the planet. And they want to know that if you're waking up and thinking about harming American citizens, or if American citizens are taken hostage and kept in dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was.
Right. Okay, so we're going to murder innocent people because the government did something. So you don't think that spins out into in some way influencing the opinions of other governments who go, well, shoot, if the U.S. is going to target my family, then we're going to do the same thing. And I would call that just as evil, is the point, because all that does is create that dynamic. If they're going to target your family because of things the government did, then we should call them out, and that should be enough impetus to go after those people. Not doing the same thing back. How often do I have to say this? This person's a villain. If you are going to tell me I want to do the same thing, that means you are just as evil. The idea that anybody could rationalize the targeting of a mistress and family and everything because of your grievance is insane. This is sociopathy. This is psychopathy. These people have lost it. And again, to start with, as saying Americans are the most God-living. I mean, the idea that you somehow need to frame this as some supremacist, that we're just better than everybody, is insane as well. People are different. There's different cultures with different desires, different things they praise, different things they believe in. The idea that this is supremacy, guys. Where do you think that comes from? Karp working with Israel? Think about it for yourself.
Involved and dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved.
That's insane. So the mistress was involved? That was a nice attempt, well, actually a very clumsy, poor attempt to save their carp. But the reality is you just laid out innocent people. Pretty sure the mistress wouldn't have been involved. Let's not pretend like he thought that.
You know, when Americans are spending $1 trillion on defense, what I want, and what I think my peers want is, why are these people keeping our citizens hostage, torturing our...
Yeah, he's just always, he's a one-trick pony. He's Israel, and that's all a lie, the reality. Completely. Because what he's really talking about is the Israeli hostages. But overall, I mean, think about what he's just saying right there. Let's listen again.
I want, and what I think my peers want is...
Your peers? Your peer. So you mean like the 0.001% of the billionaire trillionaire class? Because pretty sure none of us are at that level. You're so out of touch with these people. All of them are. Look at Elon Musk and his failed attempt to kind of jive with the people. Clearly, I mean, there was a lot of grifter screamers that really wanted that to be the case, but it clearly was a fumble. These people don't know you, and they are a different species as far as I'm concerned, but they really need you to think they're all the same. But of course, because a bad guy put some people that are on your side in a jail, then we should treat them all as villains, right? No, because their government is not the same thing as the people, which is exactly the point.
Why are these people keeping our citizens hostage, torturing our people, attacking our allies?
Maybe ask why the U.S. did it first. And that's not to say that it's rationalized. I never would ever make that argument to say that it's okay. They did it, so we're going to do it. That's crazy. I will never make that argument, despite that being like vast majority of the conversation these days. But the point still remains. Not to say it's acceptable, but to understand why it might happen, seeing as how the U.S. government and Saudi Arabia and Israel and the UAE were running a torture prison. They were literally torturing people, the UAE through Yemen. I mean, this is wild. This is covered by the Mid-Press News. This was to be all sorts of people using waffle irons and rape and all sorts of things. This was publicly covered. You don't think people then use that to think about what look at what the Americans did to me. Look what they did to my family. And let's be clear, some of them might think that they are then justified to do it to everybody, which is what you guys created. But the reality is most of them are very aware that it is the government they're dealing with, not the people. This is why, for a point I'll come back to later with Peter Santilli interview, most Iranians like Americans. That may seem confounding to you unless you understand that they know the government's doing this. It's simple. Anyone that's ever been there will tell you that. These people are trying to confuse you, trying to lie to you for their interests, really at the expense of everybody.
Maligning us in what was once called the United Nations, basically a discriminatory institution against anything good.
Oh, okay. So United Nations, which I have all sorts of criticism for, is just discriminatory against anything good? I mean, what a stupid thing to say. If that's the case, then you guys wouldn't lean into their resolutions all the time. If they're discriminatory against everything good, then that means that you guys are leaning in with bad things then, right? Oh, he didn't mean all of them. Oh, well, he said that. The point is that's insane. That's because they said Hamas is the UN. The reality is the UN has called out a ton of stuff that is wrong. But the UN is not just one entity, guys. It's a amalgam of all sorts of different things. The point is that what the UN has called out around Israel 50,000 times over is true, whether or not they're compromised. For them to just disregard that shows you what their agenda is. You think they aren't aware of the many, 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 many different crimes Israel's been caught committing over the years? They know. They don't care.
We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared. And that's why this conference is so important, because we have the best products in the world, and we cannot have parity. Our adversaries do not have our moral compunction.
That's othering, guys. You're simply dehumanizing the other. Our adversaries are not the same. They're not as human. They don't have feelings and love and joy. That's not what he said, but that's the implication. They don't have the same moral compass we do. They're just not the same. Well, there's plenty of differences amongst a lot of cultures. Quite frankly, Alex Karp is probably the more different than anything we're talking about than you. You think you want to see someone who doesn't have a moral compass? It's sitting right in front of you. Now, whether these governments are the same or not wouldn't surprise me. But you have to understand what they're getting this forward. They're not doing this to go after the government. Israel's bombing civilian areas, just like it always does. And yes, there's examples of Iran doing somewhat the same thing back in Israel. And I will condemn that if it is a unilateral attacking of civilian locations like I would anywhere. The problem, though, as we'll show you yet again today, is Israel has quite frankly managed this situation so that that's near inevitable. Now, that's not to say good, bad. You guys, we can decide as this fleshes out. The reality being that should Iran just not respond to any of the main locations that are strategically important because Israel's buried them beneath the things they've always accused everybody else of doing? That's a hard decision. The bottom line is I will consistently call out a crime like that no matter where it's done. Most people won't do, most people will choose to ignore it when Israel does it because they go, well, they did it first, which makes you just as childish and incorrect. The problem, though, is that they are driving all of this into reality. And Israel is not going after strategic locations. In some cases, they're bombing things they want to bomb, but they're targeting civilian apartment buildings. This is just as provable as it was in Lebanon, just as provable as it was in Syria, just as provable as it was in Gaza, and is. Think about how incredibly consistent that is. And they've been caught in every single location, international bodies, human rights groups, every single time in the UN. But of course, they're all Hamas, according to Alex Karp here, who knows better.
Even they will take advantage of our niceness, kindness, our desire to be at home in Nebraska or New Hampshire or wherever we live in our peaceful environments. And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. And if you give that to the American people will go back and say, and honestly, probably shouldn't say this is why I thought the Democrats were going to lose the election, why they did, because people want to live in peace. They want to go home. They do not want to hear your woke pagan ideology.
Right, because that's all it is. You say woke and everyone's on your side who's blindly partisan, right? That was just a manipulation like all the rest of it, guys. Or just like the immigration point. They don't care about any of these things. They care about using these things to achieve the end, which is all the stuff we're talking about. But again,
take advantage of our niceness, kindness, our desire to be at home in Nebraska or New Hampshire or wherever we live in our peaceful environments. And they need to wake up scared.
Scared. So who's scared? Is the government in their nuclear bunkers? Are they scared? Probably not. You know who is scared? The innocent civilians who are taking the brunt of it every single time, no matter what we're talking about. He knows that. He doesn't care.
And safe means that the other person is scared. That's how you make someone safe. They're safe. And they do not want to hear your woke pagan ideology. They want to know they're safe. And safe means that the other person is scared. That's how you make someone safe.
No, that's shockingly stupid. Somebody who is scared acts irrationally. Someone who's scared does not, especially if they're scared to the point to where they're going to be annihilated. Do you think they then factor in what tomorrow looks like? Or do you think they just go all out because they have to, because they're no tomorrow won't exist? If you put someone in a desperate corner, then you're going to get irrational action. But gee, that's just crazy, Ryan. That's not like we've seen it 100,000 times in history. These people are not stupid. They are literally puppeteering us into this destruction for their own benefit. It's everywhere you look right now.
And the average American person understands this. Unfortunately, many of the intellectually captured institutions funneled and intellectually owned by the Berkeley faculty do not. And that's what they want. It's sure as hell what I want. And that's what Palantir and all the people in this room, I hope we're here to serve the American people. And my version of service is the soldiers are happier, the enemies are scared, and Americans go back to enjoying the fact that we're the only one with a real tech scene in this country, and we're going to win everything.
Okay. So a good thing to do is remember the metrics you laid out there. So in a year, 5 years, in a decade, if we get to a point to where none of that's the reality, remember this point. Remember that these people drove us here under the argument that creating this would cause peace, which is just about the argument of every despot in history. So that's Robin Minotti sharing that. This man is a complete psychopath. I happen to agree. Now, look, guys, you don't need to look much further than to recognize that good, moral, honest people do not align themselves with a genocidal maniac. That goes for anybody. Anyone out there who is still standing by Netanyahu or the Israeli government at large. This is not hard to understand. And that's why this is so confounding for these power structures, because the world sees this. The Republicans see it. The Democrats see it. Those that see it all as a lie see it. Guys, we all see it. Everybody. That's why it's so insane. And yet they will partner at the height at January 2024. A strategic partnership, which then led to AI killing tons and tons and tons of people, as well as absorbing all the information, testing new battle tech, all sorts of things they've been using on the Palestinians and you, by the way, over the immigration overlap, the biometric discussion, scanning everybody in this country. It just never stops. And guess who has access to all of that? That's one of the major parts there. Israel, guys. Now, Alan McLeod did a really great breakdown. We've actually pointed to this in the past. But this is a thread he did I think today he put this out. But it's a thread kind of going back to the articles right here. But it's a long thread of all these different overlaps. He simply says, in light of Iran's allegations about WhatsApp sharing user location data with Israel, which is not new, and frankly is one of the most obvious parts of all of this, I include these like I do every time I mention it, Israeli spyware firm NSO Group found liable in a court of law for hacks of WhatsApp users. This is not very difficult to see. Oh, and I'll grab this one too. Show you that in a second. But so the point is that in light of that, it's important to understand how deep Israeli intelligence penetration of big tech firms go. And this is Palantir. I mean, very chief among them, very obviously. Well, you can read through this for yourself. And the point is, start with Meta, and it's 82, Unit 8200. Israeli intelligence infiltration of the tech field. And that has been going on a long time. But read through it. It's very clear. This is important to understand. I'll include that article about the actual law, in the court ruling that they're guilty for hacking people, which, by the way, that's not the first time. I'll also include the article of Derek's meet the spyware companies preparing to unleash their tech in Trump's second term. And that NSO, Pegasus, it's all the same overlapping stuff. And this is being allowed to infiltrate this country, as well as the general discussion of December 7, 2024, Israel's global cybersecurity infiltration. A very real, very provable problem. And this one I just added last. Let's not forget that we already saw an example of this in this administration, where everybody focused on the Signal app, the whole Signal gate, they called it, which was a kind of tactical distraction, in my opinion, because it wasn't about the Signal app. It was about the fact that Waltz and apparently everybody else is using an app called Telemessage, an Israeli Unit 8200 created app that archives the Signal conversations. And so if you're worried about Signal being compromised for the inner circle of the White House, look no further than what already happened. The State Department revealed to be using Israeli intelligence-linked chat app that it was involved in a recent hack. The hack itself fell by the wayside because everybody's talking about the Signal gate discussion, which very clearly seemed to be a tactical distraction. Waltz and the rest of them were caught using this in real time. That picture is what got this going. And it turned out an Israeli app was archiving the internal conversations of Trump's administration. But yeah, you all understand why that got no attention, right? Because that's totally benign. My God. And I added this last. I haven't got a chance to go through this. So fair warning, DD Geopolitics does good work. I just don't like to share anything that I haven't looked through myself. The point is I saw this last second and I just thought it was relevant. So I'll come back, probably discuss this in the next show. There's the link to the Substack. DD Geopolitics says did Palantir software help Israel fabricate a war pretext? I wish I had more time to go through this. It was like last second before the show was starting. On June 12th, they write, Israel bombed Iran's nuclear sites. So they claim anyway. I do think they bombed certain installations. I just don't know how I just have yet to see the accuracy of what they claim pan out, and they lie about everything. So it's important to question it. Days later, an Iranian AI scientist was killed in a separate strike that was reported. Both attacks trace back to one source, the International Atomic Energy Agency's Mosaic system, powered by Palantir. Very interesting. Now, the point was we already saw this overlap, right, of them basically accusing both Israel and these different government agencies from being involved. But the fact that Palantir runs all of this, that could just be the fact that they run everything, it seems, the government. But that's kind of my point. Or it could very well be that is the choke point. That is the back door. Check it out for yourself. We will come back to this. I'm sure this is going to be a great article. Now, let's talk about the infiltration of the government in general. Now, this is something we've gone over 100 times, and there's lots of in-depth shows we've done about this where basically the whole show was covering all these different points. But I just want to cover some other videos and clips and points that are simply just keeps it in your mind. The obvious reality of that, it's just not Ryan's opinion, or people like Colonel Wilkerson or Jeffrey Sachs, or people that are telling you that this government has been overtaken by something else. Now, my point is always, it's so interesting to me that of all groups, conservatives seem very attuned to the possibility of regime change or conspiracy theory, except when their person's in power, right? The idea that we just can't stop hearing, and I'm okay with that, theories about China or anybody else infiltrating the U.S. government and manipulating them for their 1,000-year plan. Okay, and then we get the exact same evidence, if not in way more than that, from Israel. And yet, because Trump's connected to it, it's not like it doesn't even matter. Now, to be clear, a lot of conservatives are calling it out, but not the team sport politics leaders at the top of the movement. Now, here is going underground. This is in a post, rather. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon in 2002. This is important. Let's also not forget his opinion on Israel's honesty.
Let me preface these remarks with I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars in their intelligence community, in their propaganda community, certainly, and in their leadership. They are inveterate liars. Let me say that again. They are liars. So you can't believe anything that comes out of Jerusalem. It's all propaganda.
Indeed. He knows what he's talking about. Now, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. Let's watch the clip.
It's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon in 2002. The Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does.
I mean, just, think about that kind of a statement. I mean, and let's be clear, this is not some kind of a, satirical, it's absolutely insane to me that we can have this clear of a statement from somebody, a colonel, and yet and so many, I mean, I think it's obvious. I don't even need to go through that tap dance anymore. I mean, it's obvious, guys. It is not a contentious opinion anymore to consider the obviousness of this. Now, you can argue that there's more nuance, that maybe they have more influence here or there, but they don't completely control everything. Sure, I could consider that. But the fact that we're even having to debate whether or not Israel has internal influence over the government, that's the frustrating part about this. We're debating something that has been proven 75 times over. We're not debating with people that are honest anymore. We're debating with career manipulators who pretend like the debate is always ongoing. That's the problem. That's why people like him have come out and said this. Now, it says the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification. They went upstairs. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does. That's Donald Rumsfeld, guys. Here, Jeffrey Sachs. Similar conversation with Judge Napolitano.
Certainly, Mossad is in the lead. It's assassination and murder unit number one. But Mossad effectively has determined U.S. policy for decades, and Trump is falling into line. We know that our foreign policy is governed by a deep state apparatus, the CIA, Mossad, MI6, as you said, and we know that the actions that occur, for example, Ukraine's attack on Russia's strategic nuclear bombers, had the same provenance, that is the same authors as Israel's attack in Tehran last week. Same methods, same crates carrying drones inside a country to make a decapitation strike or to make a strategic strike. So Mossad was involved in both the Ukraine operation and in the Tehran operation last week. What did the CIA know? Well, of course it knew. It was involved in all of this. Who leads all of this? Mossad, I would say. It's weird, but it's actually true. America does not have an America First foreign policy, despite what Donald Trump says. America has an Israel First foreign policy. It happens that Israel's foreign policy is completely reckless, dangerous, and delusional. And it has been that way for decades. The U.S. will spend trillions of dollars and lives and the utter destruction of world trust in the United States to do this extremist Zionist bidding.
He clearly sees it, right? StreamYard, give me some trouble here. There we go. He clearly sees it, guys. I mean, the point is, it's the, like, my opinion would be that the outcome of Zionism driving that is not like, it could be just as a kind of a driving point, but I think it's about the actual internal collapse of this country, which I'm going to get to in a minute. That's not a secret opinion, but it comes more so from, religious entities, but some people in the current Knesset, in the current Israeli government, as well as those in current Trump cabinet, who believe in biblical Zionism, which is just terrifying when you understand what they truly believe. But the question is whether they all believe it or whether it's really going to... My point is, if anybody does, that in some ways drives their actions. And that's terrifying when you understand that there are people in Trump's inner circle who believe the West must collapse before Israel can gain what it's supposed to gain. That's their belief. And these are people like... I always forget his name. It was Waltz is one of them, Besant is one of them, Hegseth, for example. There's another one I'm forgetting, but... I can see his face. Shoot, that's frustrating. He's the one that I'm really picturing. He's like religiously aggressive about this. Religiously meaning legit, like literally. But Lee Fang points this out, and this is just going to some overlapping points. Ted Cruz told Tucker Carlson, which you might have seen. I got some points we'll highlight today, but frankly, the whole thing seems kind of contrived. I mean, there's important things to be said in there. Hey, who knows? Maybe Tucker Carlson's finally going to turn around and call it all out. But the way that this is being done, realize the conversation they're having, as much as it's breaking down some disagreements that we've been trying to call out for 10 years, that it's frustrating that has to be, it's almost as if when you recognize you've lost control of the conversation, of people's opinions, then you can use something like this to kind of recorrect it. So, making it seem like they're finally having the conversation. No, they're just giving you what we're looking at in other people's content and driving you back toward the center. That's what I feel is happening there. But there's important things that get discussed and so on, but I'll make that point as we go forward. Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz told Tucker Carlson that AIPAC doesn't coordinate with the state of Israel. Ted Cruz clearly playing the, blind Israel U.S. follower, with Tucker kind of coming in with like a half resistance point. It's interesting, but thus does not need to register under FAR. That's the claim, which is ridiculous. I mean, obviously, they don't coordinate with Israel is insane, which is the point Lee Fang is making here. That's plainly not true. They discuss coordination openly, which they do. And I'm going to bet you Cruz very well knows that. He just doesn't care. His job is to hide these things. Now he says, here's the Israeli minister stating that he asked AIPAC to lobby Congress on the ICC issue. And that's not the only time. It's actually very, very public. The tweet you're seeing in the screenshot is him just saying he met with the AIPAC leaders to tell them the direction they should be taking. That's what they do. So they're lying to you about it. Here's one of these clips, and I just think this is interesting. Glenn Greenwald shared this. And right now, the point of these is just there's another clip later in the show for a different segment. But the point now is to make the case that these are U.S. politicians openly and proudly telling you that they are doing this job for Israel. It just couldn't get much more clear than this. Here's what he actually has to say in this clip, which is probably, if you haven't heard this.
Never taken money.
Wild.
I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate.
Right.
And I've worked.
Think about that. Why would your intention be to be the leading? Oops.
To Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate.
Right. Leading defender of Israel. That's your primary objective. This is not, they're not even hiding this anymore. Why would that be? I mean, how is that even remotely about America? It's not. Here, as you've seen many times, Randy Fine. This guy is a lunatic. And Syrian Girl says, this guy's an American senator. Here, this is literally what he said. There's a reason the first time I shook Netanyahu's hand, I did not wash it until I could touch the heads of my children. I mean, really? And I think Congress, maybe anyway. Point is, it doesn't matter. The bottom line, though, is that for him to say this, it shows you a level of like worship that is terrifying. Even if you want to pretend like he's making a joke, like these people, he's the one that praises the killing of children. In every case, he takes it a step further. And this is something Trump has openly endorsed more than once. Dr. Simon Godek says, wondering why so many U.S. politicians want young Americans to die for Israel? Because the House is basically made up of three parties: Republicans, 27 members. Democrats, 84 members. AIPAC, 324 members. It's very easy to see. Now he's talking about the House, right? Not the Senate. The point is, you can see the vast majority of them, or, the point is that the vast majority of them are completely in line with what AIPAC wants. As Massey has told you, they have an AIPAC guy. Now, 84 Democrats and 24 Republicans, I'm of the mind that's probably all taken too. Let's realize AIPAC is just one, the most powerful, but just one of the 50 different Israeli influence machines that exist in this country. So consider that. He also points this out. One takes AIPAC money and pushes for war. The other doesn't and defends America. Notice a pattern? No, you can decide whether you think Thomas Massey has his own manipulations. The bottom line is it is pretty stark to recognize that he's pretty much the only one calling for no war with Iran, and he's one of the only that does not at least get money from AIPAC. It's kind of stark. Now, here is a U.S. colonel that was fired by the DOD. Why? Because he spoke up about what everyone's calling out about Israel. It just shows you an ideological control through all of this. And it's the same thing I'm going to point out when it comes to Trump and Gabbard and the rest. It's you toe the line. Is that what you voted for? I thought you wanted people who had intelligence and their own opinions and fought for freedom and didn't just toe the line of the government. Well, if you thought that, you were played, because that's not what we have. Or in regard to, we don't have what it should have been. We have the line towing side. But this is another member of the military simply calling this stuff out and being removed. And in case you forgot, here's the many different clips of Donald Trump telling you that this is what he was going to do the entire time, that he was going to fight for Israel at the expense of Americans. He was going to censor Americans for Israel, that he tells you in the clip that Israel used to control Congress, and rightly so. All of this is on the record, and we still couldn't see this coming, or people just chose not to. Here's a great clip on the concept of Zionism from Noam Chomsky. And it's just a very Huckabee. Somebody in the chat put it out there. Thank you, Huckabee. I always forget his name. He's one of the most rabidly Zionist, back to the point about people in the government. Patrick says, how to quickly dismantle the highly misleading, increasingly weaponized smear of anti-Semitism. This is just textbook. This is very well done. And the point is that this is as simple as it gets. And this is why it's a dishonest argument at its core. Anybody honest already knows that Zionism is not Judaism, that Zionism is literally a political ideology, and therefore if you call out Zionism, you're therefore by default not calling out Judaism. Now, of course, you could conflate those things in your mind and make it the both, which is exactly what they're doing. But the reality is, if I say Israel committed a crime, has nothing to do with Jewish people unless you make it about that. Now, could I secretly be thinking that? Sure, but you don't know that for a fact. And the bottom line is there is a difference. What he describes here is the basic understanding of that.
That anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism.
Actually, the locus classicus, the best formulation of this, was by an ambassador to the United Nations, Abba Eban, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, in an article that he wrote about 45 years ago, which I urge you to read, which appeared in an American Jewish journal, Congress Weekly, a major journal of the more liberal wing of the American Jewish community. He wrote an interesting article in which he was then UN ambassador from the State of Israel. He advised the American Jewish community that they had two tasks to perform. One task was to show that criticism of the policy, what he called anti-Zionism, that means actually criticisms of the policy of the State of Israel, were anti-Semitism. That's the first task. Second task, if the criticism was made by Jews, their task was to show that it's neurotic self-hatred, needs psychiatric treatment. And he gave two examples of the latter category. One was I.F. Stone, the other was me. So we have to be treated for our psychiatric disorders, and non-Jews have to be condemned for anti-Semitism if they're critical of the State of Israel. It's understandable why Israeli propaganda would take this position. I don't particularly blame Abba Eban for doing what ambassadors are sometimes supposed to do, but we ought to understand it. There is no sensible charge. No sensible charge. There's nothing to respond to. It's not a form of anti-Semitism. It's simply criticism of the criminal actions of a state. Period.
It's very simple, right? I mean, it's infuriating that we have to keep playing the game.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what I would like Israel to be. I'd like a democratic solution, one state with equal rights for all its inhabitants. Your organization, Human Rights Watch, issued a report last year about Israel, and the conclusion was it is an apartheid state. And there are 4 major human rights groups in the last 2 years who issued similar reports, reached the same conclusion. Israel is an apartheid state. So apartheid is racism. Apartheid is discrimination. But Israel is the only member of the United Nations that I know which is officially racist. And I say this because of the July 2018 nation-state law, which says the Jews have a unique right to self-determination in Israel. Unique means exclusive.
Yes.
It means Arabs have no right to self-determination. It means even if Arabs became a majority, they would still have no right to self-determination. So most certainly Zionism is a racist ideology, and it is largely responsible for the Nakba that has unfolded throughout the last century and continues today.
So going to the discussion of regime change, infiltration, but in the context of regime change, since that's very relevant today. Dr. Simon Godek points out that Israel's puppet state has carried out 101 regime change operations since 1949. Now, I'm willing to bet you it's more than that when you overlap that with other countries they've worked through and so on, but it says, and now they expect you to believe that Iran is the greatest threat to the world peace and just happens to need a regime change via yet another way of war of aggression. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. He also points out, that was the other one. We moved down. The point was just simply to recognize how many times they've used these tactics to manipulate. Now, you might not be aware that this is even not the first time they've done it in Iran. They've tried many times, and I'll go over some of those in a minute. But going back to the Operation Ajax point, this was the successful regime change of Iran. And it created a very terrible situation for most Iranians, other than those that were sycophants for the oligarchy at the top. Now, this is an article about that. This is from Matt Agarist from the Free Thought Project. 65 years ago today, and this was on August 19, 2018, the CIA conspired with the UK to overthrow Iran on behalf of big oil. And of course, Israel acutely involved in all of this. I mean, that was one part of it. But the point is, this is important to understand how this went. And it wasn't because of freedom or fighting for people's rights. They destroyed all of that to create what they wanted in the country. Operation Ajax, this was my show, August 20th, 2018. Operation Ajax, at the time, interesting always to think about what we were covering at the time. To be clear, obviously that was looking back at Operation Ajax. Yemen genocide forced into mainstream media, UN Palestinian protection, and Venezuelan economic war. Just interesting old shows. This is one from January 23rd, 2018. The path to Persia and the ongoing plot to destroy Iran. All this becomes very relevant. In this, we talked about the document with which path to Persia. This is the options for a new American strategy for Iran, in which authors mapped out the plan, which leaves no doubt as to the ultimate desire from Western financier, corporate, and governing classes. And this is James Corbett coverage on January 12th, 2018. It's called How to Engineer a Crisis. And this specifically talks about Operation Ajax and how that all went down. Very clear. It's the same thing. It's like textbook. It's what's happening today. That's why I framed the title the way I did today. What they're doing, they can't even come up with new narratives, it seems. Now, I really hope you have the time to watch through this. I wasn't able to keep up with him over the years. I haven't reached out to him in a while. I'm not sure if he's even still doing this, but Peter Santinello, excuse me. Did I say Santilli? Damn it. For those who've been listening, that's the wrong name if I said that in the beginning. Peter Santinello is who I'm talking about. That's frustrating for those that probably won't hear that as far as the beginning. Which very different in the conversation. I'm even that familiar with Santilli. We don't have an overlap really, but Peter Santinello, we discussed this. This was back in 2019. Interesting timing, by the way, seeing as how a clip we're going to show you in a second for Fox News references something specific. The title was The Truth About Iran and Its Sharp Contrast with the Mainstream Narrative. Now, he went there. And he did, this is his channel at the time. This is what he did. He traveled all over the world, not just a certain, Middle East, just everywhere, in Canada, whatever. And he documented his travels. It was like a travel thing. And he went to Iran. And and you look at his coverage, it was kind of like with the, what am I going to see? Is it going to be like what they, is it going to be like what mainstream tells us? And a lot of it kind of leaning towards that seemed likely, and then getting there and being blown away by the differences of what he's told. And he didn't have a hand. He was there by himself. He's the only one filming. And the point is that most Iranians like Americans. And there's a lot of lies about what we were told and how this works. Now, we're going to go over this for you today in part, but watch this. It's a very important discussion. Just you do not, the mainstream narrative about Iran in this country is grotesque. It's insulting. It's racist. It's wrong. The facts can prove that. Now, this little clip I'm going to play for you real quick was just from Fox. The volume's a little bit low. But we get this every time. Robert's covered this a lot. I'm going to have him back on for an interview soon, talk about this. There's a lot of people that talk about Iran who may or may not really know what they're talking about, or may have an agenda to lie about it. Now, what's important to recognize is that a lot of, I think this woman will break down for you. I don't know where she's from. I don't know her background, but I know the history around how many of the leaders of the Iranian revolution movement are working for CIA, or manipulation of Mossad, or liars there by, USAID manipulation, all sorts of different things. And I'll go over what she claims and why I think she's lying to you or doesn't understand that she's wrong. Either way, the point is that she lived there, she says, and so she has got a firsthand experience, so she says. So take that for what you will. I could certainly be wrong as well. But what I think is interesting is how often this comes to pass, and how Iranians in Iran seem to have a very different opinion by most people that I speak to. But let's listen to what she has to say first and what Fox is giving a platform to. Now, one thing I'll say before we listen, ask yourself why, even though we know it's clear, there's a very large opinion out there that says they're wrong, that says that, there's people that have don't like our current government, but we don't want anybody stepping in, or rather that we're being lied to about what happened here, or the lies of what your government will do, for example, are misrepresented in Western propaganda. They could be wrong, of course, but why is that not an opinion you get balanced next to this one? Have you ever seen Fox or CNN have somebody on that gives you that other side of the narrative? Or is it only really people debating about how bad it is? There's a reason that's the way this goes. And what she says in this, not just about the events of the past, but the argument that right now, if Donald Trump lets them make a deal, then they're going to kill everybody. Doesn't that seem like they're literally like they're manufacturing the direction that leads only to war? Let's listen.
How ready is it to embrace the modern world if there were different leadership for Iran?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even just the way they start. Embrace the modern world? This is what's so insanely stupid. Iran is one of the most technologically advanced places in the world. It's a shockingly stupid for them to act like there's some barbarians in caves, and if they don't get some new people, they can join them future. So starting off that, and this isn't where the clip started, obviously, but just where we're starting, that's how incredibly stupid this is. And you think she doesn't know that? She says she lived there. Just seems like a strange thing to say.
As you said, I lived 23 years of Iran, so what I'm saying is not speculation or an outsider's perspective. This is my lived experiences.
Okay, but realize just because she lived there does not mean that she couldn't possibly be lying. I'm not saying I know for sure. I disagree with what she's about to say, but realize that it's funny how they frame that as somehow, well, now you're about to hear the truth. I disagree.
Let me be clear. Islamic Republic is a terrorist organization that has taken our nation hostage for the past 46 years and
got it. Okay. So after the country was taken back from the U.S. and Israel, it's always from since then been a terrorist organization. Despite the fact that they haven't invaded other countries, they haven't destroyed any other, countries' resources, like the U.S. and Israel have done like every 20 seconds since then. Or have repeatedly tried to overthrow this country at the expense of the Iranian people, or have starved the Iranian people many, many, many times over. I mean, just think about it. It's just I can't take this at face value with that kind of an insane starting point. Like, you realize how much they've done to hurt the Iranian people, right? We'll play these clips. Giuliani, I mean, here, I'll play it now and I'll probably play it again. The idea that you can have somebody like Giuliani, who can literally stand in front of the MEK, by the way, which was the group they wanted to take power back then and up until pretty much right now as well. They are a religious extremist cult, according to even the U.S. government. And this is who he's speaking to, and he's trying to tell you that we're succeeding by starving them to death.
So now tell me that you're not a serious threat. If the regime we're trying to overthrow sees us as a threat, you are a threat. It is a reality. The protests are getting worse. I don't know when we're going to overthrow them. It could be in a few days, months, a couple of years, but it's going to happen.
See? The plan was always this, guys. Don't let them tell you otherwise.
They are going to be overthrown. The people of Iran obviously have now had enough. The sanctions are working.
Yeah, the sanctions that are causing the strife for the people. The sanctions the U.S. government put on for basically no reason despite their own agendas. So that's what he's talking about right here.
The currency is going to nothing.
Because of their actions and their sanctions, not because of Iran.
They're where Russia was. They're where Poland was. We see signs of young men and women saying, give me some food.
Because they're starving them, not because of Iran, which is what he's actually saying, understand. There's no evidence to suggest Iran was deliberately starving their people, that they are restricting anything, just like with Venezuela. Can we all acknowledge now that the lie about Venezuela and the fact that they mismanaged their country and people were starving was a manufactured regime change tactic by the United States that failed? That's how these people operate, guys.
We saw a sign of a man trying to sell his internal organs for $500 American, probably a fortune in Iran today. This is truly pitiful. These are the kinds of conditions that lead to successful revolution.
Now, make sure you didn't misunderstand that. Creating the circumstances because of your actions that cause people to sell their organs for food, that is what creates a lasting regime change. Or what it will. We'll make sure you say it. I'll say it exactly as he said.
Conditions that lead to successful revolution.
The conditions that lead to successful revolution. So basically what he's saying is this is commonplace, that we starve and rape and torture and murder and get them right where we want them. And that's the good stuff, guys. That's freedom. This is who we're dealing with. This is a byproduct. Giuliani's not he's a villain, but he's an extension of the problem. Trump's administration, or just simply the U.S. government, guys. So that's who we're talking about here.
The rule or an outsider's perspective. This is my lived experiences. Let me be clear. Islamic Republic is a terrorist organization that has taken our nation hostage for the past 46 years and has ruled through fear, arresting, kidnapping, torturing, and killing our people since day one.
Okay, so we're talking about Israel, United States? No, just Iran. Okay, we don't care if Israel kidnaps and tortures and murders and all that. That's okay. But is Iran doing that? Now, there's examples like any other government I can point out of actions that I argue are violation of human rights or are coercive or but are they doing the way they're framing that? I flatly disagree. The idea that these arguments that they just murder everywhere or kill anybody, it's not, as far as I can tell, as far as Robert Report or experts that I listen to, that is not the real picture. Now, you can disagree and we should debate and we should find out, but understand if every single thing we're being fed comes from groups that have been caught repeatedly lying about this very country, shouldn't we go, maybe they're lying again? It's the same point with Israel. Now, I'm not going to say I have all the answers. Again, do not pretend that I'm saying that they're somehow benevolent. I think all these governments are against us, everyone, including their people. They will take whatever they can, just like they did during COVID-19, to control your life. But that's not the same as saying they're just murdering everybody like the U.S. is saying. It's not the reality as far as I can tell. Going back to all those other points, even if you want to make that the case, are you pretending that the U.S. government or Israel are going to swing in and stop that, despite them doing that literally everywhere else? And the last time they did this, you can easily prove they turned it into a disgusting, despotic hellhole for everybody other than the people on their inner circle, like they did in Afghanistan, like they did in Syria, like they're doing in Iraq, like they do everywhere. But let's pretend like I'm wrong, because that's not obviously proven in every country they pretended they saved. How about Libya? How's that working out?
And let me absolutely direct. The people of Iran...
I want to point one more thing out too, and I'll let it play a little more. The way she's talking seems odd to me. Let me be clear. That's a very government type of thing. Or then she tries to kind of say it again. Let me be direct. These are prompts. This feels very controlled to me.
Taken our nation hostage
for
the past 46 years and has ruled through fear, arresting, kidnapping, torturing, and killing our people since day one. And let me ask—
It is a democracy, by the way, despite all the lies. So the argument doesn't make any sense with the basic idea of not saying there's no crimes, not saying the government's not doing things just like our government's doing. You know, like trying to assassinate Julian Assange or kidnapping Americans who are doing things overseas. Yeah, that's your government, guys. And it wouldn't surprise me if Iran's doing it. But it is also you can call it a limited democracy. I don't even think our votes translate. The point is to understand the full picture.
Absolutely direct. The people of Iran are not the regime. We are nothing like them. And we have shown that through uprisings throughout the years since the beginning of the regime.
So right there, I can easily prove to you that almost every single one that she's about to list off that we've already seen were at the very least influenced and fanned by Israel and the United States and outside forces. That's easily proven. Now, I'm not saying that because it's my opinion. We've done this. We were covering it when this went down. And it's sort of like the one for example, we saw in China, where you literally ended up with a photograph of people inside the U.S. government intelligence apparatus speaking to the so-called leaders of the movement. Oops. No, we were just talking to make sure they were okay. This is how lazy this gets. The problem is that these regime change efforts almost always start with these fake protests that they use, and then they end up in some way hurting or killing or attacking their own people and claim it was the government. Guys, we've seen this 15 times over. Now, maybe she doesn't know that. Let's also be clear that there are organic parts of this almost every time too, because there are movements that want the government to change. Those, though, are the movements that will turn around and tell you, but we don't want the U.S. doing anything. We don't want them involved. We want to handle this ourselves. So it's a lie from whatever angle you spin it in. But this idea,
I've shown that through uprisings.
and that they're not the same thing, that they're just, they're not us. This is trying to connect this idea that somehow that like she's siding with the people of Iran. It's the same thing they do with the MEK, the rest of them. They're fighting for the freedom of the people. That's what they tried to do. In regard to why, if she even is being honest here, that this is why she's being put in front of you.
Throughout the years, since the beginning of the regime, in 1999, 2008, 2019, 2022.
All of them. I mean, those are like the exact moments we've all covered. I'll go over at least a couple of them next.
And every time the Islamic Republic has responded brutally. Take 2019. In 3 days of complete shutdown, they cracked down on people and...
Yeah, 2019, remember that was when, as I already talked about, and the one after that, where they cut the internet and blamed it on Iran. And this was a provable fact. Israel and the rest are involved in this almost every single time.
Killed 1,500 unarmed civilians.
Okay, we'll talk about that explicitly next, whether or not that's the case.
But people have shown clearly that they are ready for a new regime.
So, and realize in the background, they're juxtaposing this next to Israel's illegal bombings of Iran. Right? So that's what they're ready for regime change, right? So this is a good thing. So Israel is trying to help the world, right?
They are ready for freedom and taking their country back.
So think about the idea of what that looked like for Libya, for Iraq, for Syria, right? So through bombing of their country and civilian locations, they're going to bomb them into freedom. Ask the Palestinians how that works out for them. We got Hamas out of the way, but we also killed all of you along the way because they don't really care about what they're saying they care about. They're going after greater Israel. Ask the Syrians how that worked out. Did they liberate the Syrians? No, they executed all of them. I don't mean literally every Syrian, but the point was they were ethnically cleansing, running through this rampant area, just killing people at large, or their terrorists were doing so. Like, just think about how insane it is to pretend like these are the groups that are going to somehow, through violence, liberate the Iranian people who they've been demonizing forever. They just got done telling you they're all crazy. They're all different except this girl. Pompeo and Bolton and Trump and Netanyahu. They're not talking about the government. They're saying these people are gross and bad and backward. Am I crazy? You guys all see it too. So then funny how it's one moment later you're saying we have to save them. It's the same thing they're doing with Hamas and Palestinians, and the same way they're involved with these groups and the funding of the MEK and the group they're trying to create. It's just textbook, guys. Now, again, I don't know whether she knows this or not. It's irrelevant to me.
I appreciate that perspective, and I have no doubt of its veracity. You have the lived experiences.
Great journalism, right? No doubt whatsoever because you were there and you know. Come on, guys. That's just silly. That's not journalism right there. I don't care whether whether she believes it or not. It's the same way we covered the rape conversation in Israel post-October 7th. Right? Based on his journalism right there, we should have said, well, clearly you know it had happened because you were there. No, because maybe she's lying, bud, or maybe she thinks she's right and she doesn't know. Maybe she was paid. Maybe, but journalists for Fox News blindly take at face value the narrative that works for their agenda, because that's mainstream alternative media journalism, guys. Welcome to the new stage of journalism.
You just explained. And there has been indications that we have evidence, even on our side of the globe, that the Iranian people do not want to live under the Ayatollah.
Some of them, sure. Just like half this country doesn't want to live under the rule of Donald Trump. Does that mean we should ask for Israel to regime change us? Sounds like the same logic, doesn't it?
The question then, though, does still remain, and it's one that everyone has to ask in analyzing what comes after the Islamic Republic. Is it your sense that the population, while perhaps, to your point, a majority or unified, is opposed to the Ayatollah, they're ready to come together in some sense of coalesced government, or are there tensions inside the population that could be unleashed if you take away even an oppressive controlling mechanism like the Ayatollah?
I mean, what are we talking about? You think this 20-something girl who lived there a long time ago has any idea about any of that? She's not some intelligence expert, guys. This is a random person who simply lived there. Like, even if she lived there yesterday, why would she have insight into all of those things? Or because she has an opinion that therefore means that the Iranian people are ready for this? How could she possibly articulate that or have any insight into what all the Iranian people want in one situation? This is just simply stupid to me. And you understand why, hopefully, by now, whether or not she means what she's saying.
So what we've seen so far is that the nation, when it comes to uprisings, come together on these issues. Mahsa Amini was a Kurdish girl who was killed, and from Tehran to Zahedan, Baluch people, Kurdish people, Turks, they all rise together. So we've seen this. We have evidence that when it comes to the integrity of the country, people are all united together.
And I got to be honest, listen to her accent. And you tell me where you think, that to me, the way she's pronouncing certain letters, just a thought. Things give you an indication about maybe where she's I mean, it doesn't sound like the same dialect, the same accent that I'm used to from any of these locations we're talking about.
This, we have evidence that when it comes to the integrity of the country, people are all united together against the government.
That is simply false. There's a very large grouping of people, which in the United States, by the way, or other parts of the world, who are protesting in support of Iran's government against Israel. But there's massive people protesting in Iran for it's the same thing. There's at the very least a clear divide of people that want to support the government versus whoever else might come in, or versus anything that might change the government, right? Just like people right now would support Trump no matter what. We all know that. It's not hard to see. And yet they want you to believe that literally everyone in the whole country is united against changing the government. I mean, why couldn't they just make a more balanced, nuanced argument? Well, because that's typical Israeli propaganda as far as I'm concerned. It's bombastic, it's stupid, and it's in your face.
Would it be challenges after the Islamic Republic? Yes, it would be. It would not be easy.
Oh, I see. So removing an entire government and jamming through with violence wouldn't be simple? Pfft, what a shock.
But what we have seen and lived it for the past 46 years is that we do not want to live under the regime, and
every one of them, right? So she's currently representing every single Iranian's opinion right now on Fox.
we know how bad it can get, and right at this point, the main fear comes from the fact that people think, what if this war stops now with a deal?
Okay, guys, this is insane to me. You tell me that's not obvious. This feels like that damn it, what was her name? The Syrian girl, the young girl that was very clearly used as an operation where they were reading things and clearly she couldn't even, that was an operation and it was wildly exposed. Or the kid, Oman, in the back of the ambulance, they got exposed for literally being pain. They literally grabbed him, gave him food, and made him look like he was in the bomb. That's wag the dog stuff, guys. Our governments were caught for those things. Watch the way that she's responding here. You tell me she's not reading, and this is where it gets to the main point. We can't let them make a deal for peace because then they're going to kill everybody. That's what our argument is.
It would not be easy, but what we have seen and lived it for the past 46 years is that we do not want to live under the regime, and we know how bad it can get. And right at this point,
right here,
the main fear comes
right
from
there.
the
She's
fact
reading.
That people
She's
think,
reading.
What if this war,
my opinion, but
stops
clear
now with a deal or any other alternative while the Islamic Republic remains in power? and how they can react after this. We have evidence. We have evidence how after each time they get hit from the outside, they turn inward, they turn their vengeance on the people. People are their collateral damage, and they break down.
That's not even what that means.
And they start mass executions, mass arrests. Right now.
So, I mean, think about the logic of this. So you're telling me when they're threatened by Israel or outside forces, they turn inward and start murdering their own people? To what end? I mean, just think about the logic. Do you think that's going to slow Israel down? No, they're going to go, see, we told you. There's no possible benefit other than your argument they're just maniacs and like to murder. Which just, I mean, if we're ever going to see that, that's who we're watching right now. That's who we're literally watching continue a genocide, even though we all see it. I don't see any example that exists even outside of that. And I even to them don't ascribe that to them. There are always tactical moves that don't include just murder for murder's sake, even if you are somebody who enjoys that, if that even exists. And if it would, it'd be governments, for my opinion. I mean, just genuinely think about that. The idea, how that would possibly make sense.
People are their collateral damage, and they break down.
Sorry, it's like Syria. It's like the idea of saying, he just liked to kill, so basically they go, if he does this, we're going to invade and take over. And then he does the thing they said not to do. Why? Because, well, he's just a maniac. Despite all of his clearly tactical moves, despite the restraint they've shown, despite the allies they have. No, they just randomly did the one thing you dared them not to do. That just seems silly, doesn't it? And we now know, hopefully, if we're paying attention, those were all lies. I mean, look at how Syria ended up. This was all manufactured. We've seen this many times. How about going back even to the babies in incubators, guys? Where it turns out that was actually the ambassador's daughter of a foreign country that they literally made say that. And she cried and she was telling babies on the cold floor. She knew she was lying. That is a completely provable story. You can look it up on Wikipedia these days. And she lied and gave a very convincing performance for the CIA. I'm just saying, like, these things, it's insane to me. And so what she's saying is that they're going to turn around and kill their own people because what? They're angry because they don't know what else to do. Certainly anything could happen. Just think of the logic here and look at what they've done so far. Look at the restraint. Look at the reactions of the past. Not narratives they've spun, but what you can prove.
And they start mass executions, mass arrests. Right now, what we are observing is that as the military sites are getting bombed, on the floor of the parliament, the government is talking about mass executions after this, just in a show of strength.
Not to anything I can prove. Think about that. So they got together and said, let's just kill everybody. That'll show them. Like, guys, it's just, as much as it's so easy to fall in that trap of, because they're all maniacs or they're all Islamic jihadists that Luber tells us just hate your children. I mean, guys, just at least try to be logical here. Try to move beyond the lying government's, rationale for why they're doing the thing they're doing. Maybe, sure. But think about why that would make sense. We're going to get together and just say, let's kill them all just to do a show of force. Do you think that's going to stop them? Like they're going to go, oh no, they might kill us too. I mean, these are arguments for children, guys.
So to your question, yes, we are aware of the challenges that might come.
We are aware. I mean, am I crazy? That does not sound like an accent from Iran.
Our way after the Islamic Republic is gone. But here right now is our lifeline. This is life or death. First, facing the government.
One last question, Sam.
Right, so you have to murder them all or they're going to kill us first. You don't think that's going to drive people to rationally call for violence? Or maybe we can somehow make that into that'll lead to peace, right? Because through strength, we'll find peace, apparently, eventually, 20, 100 years from now. I just think it's insane to me that we can't see how belligerent this is. And again, it's certainly possible that she believes everything she just said. It's irrelevant to me. You could prove a lot of this.
I'm well over time, but this conversation is too important and too revealing.
Mm-hmm. And look at the headline for the podcast. Is regime change possible for Iran? Gee, I wonder if they've got an intention here.
Regime change opportunity in Iran would have to eventually come from within. As you point out, it would have to come from the people rising up under conditions where they thought they could actually accomplish victory.
Or that's what you need to present for us to think is happening, right? Like always. Because clearly the Syrian people wanted... No, they didn't. They lied to us. Clearly the Libyan people... No, they lied about that too. Clearly the Afghanistan... No, they lied about that too. So I wonder if this one will be the same. What do you think? What about Ukraine? Where they literally got caught making and throwing their own Molotov cocktails on what they claimed was aid. but it turned out to be a truck full of barbed wire and wood. Remember that? That was a fun story. I mean, it's just how many times do we have to go through this before these people get called out for what they are? That's the problem, though. Most of us, I think, are aware. It's only these same old tired screamers and these ridiculous platforms that keep the narrative going. And then Jones and Johnson and everybody come out, oh, we're all the same team. No, you guys are part of the problem. Right? The problem is, though, they give the impression that a larger grouping of people still buy it. Now, still 1% of this many people is a lot. But think about them, how many people see through this right now. That's what I'm trying to mobilize every day.
There's probably some fear, to your point, to begin that process if you don't think you can pull off victory because of the severe repercussions afterwards. So what do you think the ground would need to look like for the people to begin that process themselves in Iran?
Right now, Iranian people are completely, their internet is completely cut off, and they.
Oh, did I mix those up, Andrew? So to be clear, the Venezuela, I mean, I thought I said Venezuela, but I'm just jumping all over the place. So to be clear, in case I mixed that up, the barbed wire in the container, that was Venezuelan aid. That was Maduro. That was the Guaido overlap. Then there was the Ukraine examples of shooting. I probably just blended it all together. The point is, Venezuela was the discussion of the barbed wire in the truck, the Molotov cocktails. But examples of these things overlap all over the place. I just saw him mention that in the chat. Thank you, Andrew. I don't remember if I made that mistake or not, but it probably did. But the point is that in Ukraine, for example, you can go to the Maidan Square, the provable example of Azov movement members and the, what's the name of that other group? I'm blanking on it. There's another major neo-Nazi element group that came out early and basically advertised that we did what the U.S. government asked us to do, that we were there marching. They manufactured the event. They shot people and they used it to create the regime change. It's the same thing they do everywhere, guys. My point with what the Venezuela one was, that was an example of a failure. They didn't successfully do it. It got called out, and we still know these things. That's how they operate. And what I'm going to come to after this clip is many examples of where they've already been caught trying in Iran many times.
They don't have connection to the outside world. So they don't see all the damages that all the bombings has caused the Islamic Republic. I believe they are still in a state of fear and shock. They still cannot completely comprehend how weak the government is. They first need to feel safe enough to...
See, so this is aimed at, in my opinion, the people. They're trying to convince people in the middle in Iran who may listen to this, which I'm willing to bet you is going to find its way through the internet block that Israel's carrying out when they need it to, is going to ultimately be saying, look, just do this and you'll get freedom. Now, it's a compounding factor. One of it is to maybe reach people they're in the middle. They just want the chaos to end, but don't really think, okay, well, that sounds like it will make sense. I'll side with the freedom guy, whatever. But most Iranians aren't stupid. They know what the U.S. has done over the years. But there's another factor in this. They're making their lives hell. Israel's bombing, killing innocent people. Now, every time in the past, there's been all sorts of overlaps, whether it's starvation, whether it's, there's different things they create. Like in Syria, there's always confounding factors, cutting off the access to fuel. The point is they drive them into desperation. So they choose to do that. Even if they know the U.S. and Israel are the ones that are doing it, they'll still go, fine. I'll let you take over if you just stop the suffering of my family. And so this message is meant to say that, convey that. Right? There may be suffering, but from them, maybe from us, it'll stop. At least they claim that if you go along with this agenda. It's kind of classic.
Come out, and then after that, get an indication of the government being weak enough so that they cannot crack down on people, just like the past uprisings when they oppressed people and the mass arrests and all that started.
Right. So basically, let Israel kill them all enough to where they can't fight back. It's not like they have an agenda, clearly. It's not like it all perfectly lines up with exactly what they're trying to accomplish or anything. But, it's worth you considering all of this. Now, just even asking Grok, which I'm going to go over a whole bunch of our work of the past. Simply, I was curious what it had to say. What's the evidence to support that Iran killed 1,500 people in 2019, or any of the others, by the way? And which I already knew. The claim that Iranian security forces killed approximately 1,500 people during the 2019 protest stems primarily from Reuters, which cited 3 anonymous Iranian interior ministers. Right. So people, and again, that if it's anonymous, we can't verify what they actually are, where they're from. So we got 3 anonymous people who told Reuters exactly what they needed to be told and exactly what they wanted us to say that exactly worked for the U.S. Israeli agenda. So historically, we should go, well, based on what's happened before, they're probably lying. Now that could be wrong, but historically, if they've lied most of the time, or even going back to Bolton, for example, and Olympic mines and the claim of a credible threat, which turned into just boats in the harbors. And they're even now claiming that they tried to threaten, assassinate Bolton. All these are, or trying to kill Trump, all these claims, which very likely could be true, seeing as how what they've been doing their entire careers has been trying to destroy that entire country. The evidence still pans out to not be any kind of outcome. And ultimately, the evidence they say is proving those things are simply their intelligence that we never get to verify. Anyway, the bottom line is that this is one of many things that keeps getting stated, yet the evidence rarely seems to back it up. Now, again, here's what Syrian Girl pointed out. Just not to forget the overlap to this. She says, this is why they murdered Syrians for 14 years. Now, it's much more than just one thing, but just recognize how long we've been talking about that. Occupied Iraq, Israel's in control. They need Syria for this ability to conduct this in Iran, but for many other things. Greater Israel. But think about that, guys. The moment that they took over Syria, Israel rushed in, took control, and here we are. And Iran kicks off. I mean, almost instantaneously. It's not hard to see. Let's just stop lying to ourselves about what this really is. Now, we just played this clip. Rudy Giuliani celebrates starvation of Iranian civilians. It's as simple as it sounds. You can watch the whole thing. Max covered it back then. And he's speaking to the MEK. That this is a terrorist organization. Now, this used to be kind of the quiet side group. They wanted to be in power, but it got a lot of attention for being, I mean, they're a religious extremist group. Far, far more religious extremist than any of the groups that they are pointing to. You know, that's what's so crazy about it. And so that's why I think it kind of got pushed away. Still, I think is in the conversation, but it's worth considering that as we go through this. But read this for yourself, written by Caitlin Johnstone. This was one of my shows from June 26, 2019. And the point in this one was UAE rejects U.S. proof of Iran guilt. MEK caught admitting a false flag. Now, this just relates to the point of what we're talking about in 2019. And this was the lies about what they said was happening then. And this is overlapping with the MEK. This is 2018. Former MEK official exposes Saudi Arabia's covert funding of Iranian terror group. This is what they do. They fund, and just like we saw with the moderate rebels or Israel and Hamas or anybody else, they create the situation they use to justify their actions. By creating the group they claim is responsible of the culture, right? Sort of like terrorism in Israel and what they've done in the area. In this case, they're funding groups they then point to and say, that's what's wrong with the area. But really, it's them doing it. It's how they operate. And this is an important one to hear. This is from 2019. And this is the same conversation about the riot that then they killed everybody, she was telling us, right? Well, this is an article from Moon of Alabama. There are riots in Iran and the usual suspects are in on it. On this source material, as always, but it says the Iranian government decided to increase Iran's super low gasoline prices. We covered this at the time. The new price will only apply to the amount of gas that exceeds a subsidized 60 liter per family per month. The additional money will be distributed to the poor. Now, the point is they used that at the time to argue they were restricting fuel. They weren't. It was they lie about everything they can, guys. It says the usual suspects have used the announcement to launch protests and riots in several Iranian cities. Some banks were set on fire and security personnel was attacked. Okay, so right there, if you have elements from outside forces who are invading security or even not, look at what our current government's doing with our own people. The point is to argue that that was them just responding to random protest was simply false. And it says the CIA and the MEK cult are certainly trying to push for additional disturbances. So in some cases, there are people caught up who maybe believe the protest, but in every case I've covered in this discussion, you get the simmering down of the original protest and then the violence kicks off. Two separate things. So they're using on the back of what might have been legitimate to roll into just destabilization to justify what they want. And you could prove they were involved. It says, as long as he can remember, such protests and riots have happened in Iran every other year or so. They usually die down within a week. I'm confident he says that the same will happen this time. It doesn't mean random protests. I mean manufactured. He goes, but that, of course, does not stop the regime changers and their clacker to raise the usual nonsense. So we get eyewitness testimony from activists who are not in Iran or events that allegedly happened within Iran. Just like we just heard. Sure, he was there before, but how does she have any insight into what's going on now? It's the same game as always. This is an article from 2019 or show Iran false flag. Same conversation and just interesting. I'm just including them for you. This was also at the same time we discussed Bolivia's coup government was weirdly seeking Israel's help. Surprise, surprise. And Israel's been in Yemen since day one. See how long we've been doing this? This is from 2019. I'm telling you guys, as much as we are blacklisted and suppressed, even to those that follow us. If you go directly to thelastamericanvagabond.com and go to the search bar right here, I'm willing to bet you almost anything that happens right now. You can come to this bar and search in the keyword and you'll find something relevant to that conversation. We've been doing this for a decade plus, and the conversations have been in depth since the beginning. Here's another discussion. This one is from September 26th, 2022. So she mentioned 2019. Here's 2022. Iran's protests are no longer about women's rights. Now, this was the conversation at the time. They were really trying to push the idea that we're fighting for women's rights in Iran. Well, I wanted to talk about this for somebody like Robert, who has covered this in depth. There's a lot to be discussing here. Now, let's be clear. The main point is you're being misled about what they care about, just like they pretended to care about Afghanistan women. No, they didn't, guys. They don't. And the point I think it makes in this article, if they cared about women's rights, they would be caring about them in Saudi Arabia too. Okay, they don't. Or in, I'll wait to make some point in a second. Here's the point that I think is important to hear. He says, whilst the U.S. government advocates for the rights of Iranian women, it kills some of those same women with its draconian sanctions, meaning they know what they're doing. And so they can't claim to be fighting for them while they starve just everybody equally. But it says the maximum pressure sanctions campaign started under former U.S. President Trump and continued under Biden, has been repeatedly criticized by leading human rights groups and the International Court of Justice, has even demanded that the sanctions be lifted for violating international law. They don't care. That's just drifted in the background. Nobody even criticizes sanctions anymore. It says, whilst human rights issues are expected to pull on the heartstrings, it is rather disappointing to see so many continue to jump on the bandwagon and encourage regime change campaigns. Remember, this is from 2022. He says, whilst there is obviously no issue with supporting women's rights, minority rights, human rights inside of Iran, it is clear, that by jumping on this trend and repeating unconfirmed reports, this aids the U.S. government's push to justify sanctions and a regime change operation. He goes, instead of a Western audience accepting the Islamic Republic of Iran as maintaining a legitimate but different governmental style to that of Western liberal democracy, for many, the instant reaction is to paint the entire Iranian state structure as barbaric. Typical. No one is required to agree with Iran's model, its laws, and its way in which it governs. As with most countries, something Americans know all too well, that we disagree, some of us hate the government. Many Iranians do, in fact, have their complaints about the management of the nation, and there are ways in which they can lobby to have the enforcement and interpretation of Islamic law changed in Iran. Which, that the kind of thing that people just, the Pompeos of the world would say you're flatly lying, or that woman would say so. Except for the fact that you can literally prove that's happened over the years, and Robert has covered this extensively. I mean, these facts matter to me, and if you can prove that that's possible, then clearly they're lying to you about that. Not to say that it's perfect. Hardly. I think all of these governments are trying to manipulate you. And if you're going to pretend that's the case, then do you think U.S. government's perfect? Well, okay, no. Well, if it's not, then why don't we regime change the country, right? The idea is you have to be logical about it across the board. They're trying to use things that exist in every country to argue that they somehow should be violently changed for the interest of other violent manipulators. It says, if the call for the overthrow of the Iranian government came from within and was for the benefit of the people of Iran, this is legitimate and is what happened in 1979, right? Which is what I'm talking about. They legitimately wanted to take their country back from the regime changers from Operation Ajax, and they did. But it says, however, many Westerners don't know or simply choose to ignore the fact that it was the British and American intelligence agencies that removed Iran's first democratically elected leader in 1953, replacing him with an autocratic dictator, the Shah. Now, we talked about this. Mossadegh in the past, from before they took over, the guy, he's basically, I think he had a image of him next to the Liberty Bell, was very adamantly pro what America was trying to westernize himself. And the bottom line was what they were saying here. Really, they wanted to control for interest that had nothing to do with what they claimed they were changing. And they were responsible for turning it into a lot of the things that ended up being today in the context of what they criticize. Now, what I'm going to get to is the religious overlap, which is different, same point, but a different side. You could frame those two different things, is what Robert addresses here next. He says, however, but he goes on to say, under the Shah, right now, by the way, the guy that's trying to act, or rather the descendants of him trying to act like he's going to be put back in power for the freedom of Iran. These people are puppets, just like Guaido, just like Hadi that they want in power of Yemen. These people are not people from these countries. They're outside puppets. But it says, under the Shah, not only were ordinary Iranians starved to death, robbed of their nation's wealth, subjected to torture, and robbed of the right to free speech, but they were also forced to change culturally to mimic the West. some may like that, right? But it says the Shah's, quote, white revolution forced the issue of women's rights in the form of dress and appearance primarily. So not really about the rights, but more so about the appearance of similar to West is all it really was about. And it was as a means of appeasing a minority of Iranians, but also forcing Western cultural domination over the Islamic-linked culture inherent in Iranian identity. At the time, Iranians lived in slums under the Shah and were subject to abject poverty, whilst white American settler communities were established throughout Iran. Starting to sound familiar to what we're dealing with today? It says, so when the Islamic Revolution overthrew the dictator Shah, wearing a hijab was a symbol of rebellion against the West and a form of defiantly preserving Iranian culture. For some. My point is that, and you can clearly see this continued as somewhat of a thing today. And the point is, there's a great misunderstanding. Now, yes, there are clear religious edicts of where that women are supposed to be wearing these, but it's not universally enforced. You can look this up anywhere. There are places all over where it's pretty lax and places where it's very strict. But just like laws that exist where that aren't universally enforced, is it really the case? I mean, it's important to think about. Or, like, how about cannabis? I mean, you could go in 1,000 different directions. What I'm going to go into next, by the way, is that you can show the same thing in other parts of the world. In Israel, for example, examples of women who are forced to wear head coverings right now in Orthodox communities in Israel. Is that the same? It's the same thing, right? Why is one problematic and one not? Now, you may still think that's not the same thing. Just wait. I have an example that will show you that it's the same thing. We'll get there in a second. It's just hypocrisy, guys. And the truth is, they don't really care about these women's rights. They care about using it for their agenda. And again, the point would be if they did, then they would care about Saudi Arabia. They would care about any number of other Islamic countries that they support for certain agendas that they don't push on. Now it says, Ali Shariati, a Marxist Islamist who served as one of Iran's leading philosophers behind the revolution, explained why this reaction inside Iran occurred. It says in the book, Religion versus Religion, he identifies the instinctive desire for a return to the culture of the past in defiance of Western modernity. Something that we see is still a prominent way of thinking today. When one simply looks at Iran's enforcement of the hijab without historical context, it would seem to be illogical. Yet it makes a lot of sense when it's placed in its proper context. And realize there's a lot of Iranians that want that, either for religious reasons or as a matter of protest. And that is a large part of the conversation. So that just because you may think differently does not then make that what they should. The point is, this is the manipulation from an outside force. Now it says the protests in Iran have in many cases turned into violent riots. And after a week of demonstrations, most genuine protests have come to a halt. This is 2022. The fact that the violence that has been used against the Iranian police and pro-government groups has been all but ignored reflects the dishonesty of the media representation in the events of the West. The point is, you are seeing manufactured violence being carried out against the authority, not by protesters, but by something else. And that's casually left out of the conversation. This is nothing new, guys. For those that are just suddenly seeing this for the first time, it behooves you to look back through this or any other website to recognize how many times they've already done this or tried to do this. Now, this is an important one. This is the same conversation, 2022. The title of this, also from Robert, Iran's protests from women's rights to regime change. Now, just one quick part on this. And this is another example, by the way. This woman is a complete cutout. She's somebody that's been used over the years as some kind of Iran freedom change person. But it says, what was originally a women's rights cause inside the borders of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which they exist, has birthed an international neo-Orientalist regime change movement, and anyone denying this obvious reality is delusional, he writes. Now, this is important. Here she is on USA Spending, which I'll show you next. His point is, this person, Misa Alinejad, he says there are the fake narrative creators, such as Misha Alinejad, who is a full-time employee for the U.S. state-owned TV and regularly meets with American neoconservative war hawks. Now, many at the time wouldn't know that. I think it's become more aware now, but she's still in the movement. But recognized at the time she was she was like the woman we just saw on Fox News, being framed as some innocent Iranian who wants freedom for her country. It's not the truth. And it says, of course, with people like Mark Pompeo, because he's all about freedom, right? We lie, we cheat, we steal Pompeo. Alinejad has been put forward as a leader of the so-called Iranian Revolution, yet is clearly working on behalf of U.S. interests. She quite literally works for the United States government. Alinejad also received about $628,000 US dollars between 2015 and 2021 from the US Agency for Global Media. She regularly shares stories that gain great traction and later turn out to be false, or at least only partially true. Now realize these things still exist today. All these, the things they were early calling out under the Doge illusion are still happening right now, whether through Reuters and their newswire services or whatever else we're talking about, or USAID and the different discussion. It's all still happening. So just recognize, in this case, she was being paid by the U.S. government and nobody wanted to talk about it at the time. Now it says it is also clear that not only have the Shah-worshipping privileged Iranian expats jumped on board to welcome Western ideological neocolonialism in Iran, but all the usual suspects have jumped in as well. It has become apparent that the riots in Iran have been encouraged by groups such as Kamala, or like C-O-M-O-L-A, Kamala, Kurdistan Democratic Party, and the MEK, terrorist cult. In addition to this, the British state-owned propaganda network, BBC Persian, U.S. state-owned Voice of America, Farsi, and the Saudi-financed Iranian International channels have been at the forefront of encouraging counter-revolutionaries, literally on the ground, encouraging them to push back against the government, all being led by U.S. government. Yeah, I already had that. I was making sure I had that one there too. Now down here it says, the West does not have a problem with Iran's Islamic laws. Excuse me. For if it did, then it would seek regime change in Saudi Arabia, an obvious point. Instead of begging Riyadh to pump more oil, as it was at the time, as it is currently doing at the time, the West couldn't care less about women's rights either, nor does it care about Iranian Kurds, the MEK cult members' ambitions, the Shah supporters, the Iranian liberal expats, or anyone else for that matter. When the West dominated Iran and had its favorite autocrat ruling it, the U.S. government moved white settlers into American gated settler communities set up next to Iranian slums where the people were starving. The situation eerily similar to that seen in occupied Palestine today. Far more now. This is 2022. Or like we saw in South Africa. I mean, guys, it's the same conversation everywhere you look. Here, by the way, this one is currently active. Or technically, no, it looks like, well, here's what's interesting. The potential end date was February 28th, 2025. That's her right there, Alina Jad. This one, last payment, March 2024 for $80,000 almost. Contractor for non-personal talent services. Yeah, clearly. So basically acting like she's from Iran. The point is, as far as I can tell, this seems to be still currently active. Now, that doesn't have to prove they're using it. Maybe it just means they haven't ended it. But this one down here, it still exists. 2025, international broadcasting. So you should very well consider whether the current government is still using her or anybody else through that. All included, all the links. You can check it for yourself. This one's from 2022. More unsubstantiated claims spread about Iran and civil unrest. Just more articles for you to read for yourself that's showing you that these lies, we were breaking these down in real time. This one from 2022, disingenuous reporting on Iran executions by Western media. Same point about people being killed and executed. You're being lied to on a regular basis by this government. Let's not forget, this is the same liar that's been caught lying in the UN today, by the way, you can't see his face. Israel's ambassador protests for Iranian women, but slaughtering Palestinian women is fine. I mean, it's very transparent. And then this one's 2024. With overthrowing Iran on the agenda, see, it's not hard to see. I could pull a Jones and be like, we know it, we were right. You know, everyone saw it coming. Western media ignored facts to spread propaganda. This article is simply showing you that in real time, you can see that they're willfully ignoring what you can prove because they're trying to push the agenda. You know, like what's happening right now. Now, let's go over a point about the bomb. The idea about this is so wild, and I think this dovetails with the point about the MAGA movement and the division. Here's an article from 2021, Robert Inlakesh, Israel's laughable history of predicting the Iran atomic bomb. You know, well before it was the current trendy thing because we all see it now, right? There's a point to be made about being ahead of these stories to the point to where you get called crazy and people ignore you and you lose following for being right. It's how this tends to go today. But we'll do it anyway because we care about the truth more than we care about gaining, okay? This point is just Robert breaking it down up until 2010 and the same conversation. lying after lie after lie after lie after lie, saying they're going to 1 year from now, they're going to build a bomb. 1 year, 6 months from now, they'll have it. And they lie about it over and over and over and over. Another article he wrote, 2024. That was 2 years later. Fox News produces Iran nuclear weapons hoax scare. Look at that. May 5th, 15th, 2024. It's almost like they were getting us ready for what's happening now. Nah, that couldn't be the case, right? Well, here, even CNN, if you can believe that, which it just shows me that everyone sees this. The writing is on the wall. The point is, manipulators everywhere are trying to gain your clout by showing you what you should already know by now. That's how this always works. But here is CNN clip showing you what we should know, that they've lied about this going back to 1996 and before that.
The deadline for attaining this goal is getting extremely close. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. That would place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
Now, it's not just the amount of times, right? Where ultimately he said this, I don't know, more times than we can count. Over and over, it's going to happen. But the fact that, let me go back when I had to step off for a second.
Arsenal of nuclear weapons, that would place a militant Islamic terror, most sponsor of global terrorism.
Yeah, right. Okay, same point. Like, the narrative has fluctuated, right? So today, well, you're seeing the overlap. I mean, the bottom line is to call them the leading state sponsor. Okay, then why is ISIS attacking them? Why has ISIS went after Iran many times in recent years? Or why are, or how about the fact that you're working alongside Al-Qaeda? Like, you guys keep telling us the home base of Al-Qaeda is Iran. Well, wait a minute. They're working alongside you in Yemen. They're working alongside you in Syria. They're working alongside you everywhere. I mean, it's insulting. You have to see by now that they are showing you, they're projecting. They're working with the very group they turn around and blame on them, like they did with Hamas, guys. It's obvious. It's when you go through these moments where you think to yourself, is literally everybody aware of this? Are we really just shouting down other liars that know that they're lying? I don't know. I just think how do people not see how clear this is?
Could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. And
the point about medium versus rich, I mean, see, right now the point is understanding that even where they're at now, they're not even close to getting to 90 plus to be able to create the material needed to make the bomb. But look at how far back they are. We're going to get to medium. Like, they know what they're doing. They're playing on the ignorance of people that don't understand what's needed for a civilian program.
Place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
Well, I'm pretty sure a few months would be less than a year. The point is to stress the idea that it's going to be soon. It's going to be soon. Every year, for a month after month, as far back as you want to look. Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency chief says there's no proof Iran's working toward the nuclear bomb. All right, so this is new, guys. Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, has reaffirmed Tuesday that the organization had no proof that Iran decided to build a bomb. Okay. That, which, by the way, actually surprises me, because really I was expecting one of these groups to be manipulated into basically lying. But here we are. They said no. Gabbard recently said no. The previous administration said both the same thing, both the IAEA as well as the previous Biden government. So why are we still pretending like this is happening because Israel says so? And then weirdly, because Israel says so, Trump knows for sure. Okay, doesn't that show you exactly what I'm talking about? Facts be damned. Trump is all about Israel no matter what. Yeah, that's obvious, guys. Here's what he had to say. Well, actually, just in case you forgot, here's what Gabbard said. I know you remember, but just in case, then we'll play you what Trump said in response. And then we're going to make an important point about why they tried to absorb these people like RFK and Gabbard, or pretended to go after Rand Paul and Ron Paul and Massey, because they're playing you. They're playing you, guys. That's what happened.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
IC, again, being the intelligence community. Pretty simple. Okay, so here's what Trump had to say. That's WikiLeaks breaking. We already know that's the reality, whether she said it or not. So when asked about that, you've probably seen this going around. It's gotten a lot of attention. He says he doesn't care what she says. Right. So the whole point was that you brought her in because you claimed you believed in her, that you trusted her, that she was the right person for the job. And then she tells you what the evidence shows, and you don't care. You only care about what Israel tells you, despite how often we've been lied. You have to see that's either blackmail control, that he's working for them, or he just doesn't know their. I mean, how in the world do you make sense of this, guys? I mean, this is why so many people are going, look, just look. Napolitano, Sachs, I mean, all these people are coming. Colonel Wilkerson, they're controlling your government. Here's what he has to say. Glenn says, Trump fought so hard and sacrificed political capital to get Tulsi as DNI because he believed, or so he claims, that she was vital to cleaning out the intel community and making it reliable. Reminded that Tulsi said the consensus is Iran isn't seeking nukes. He said he doesn't care what she says. Right? Okay. Either he thought she was going to toe the line, or he only brought her in because he thought that would allow people to believe he was something he was not.
You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
Right. So what he thinks is apparently more important than what the intelligence, what the DNI has to say. Director of National Intelligence. I don't trust any of them, but seems like a weird thing to say, right? So he's going with what Israel tells him more than anything else. I mean, everything about that feels wrong. Hold on.
Because Tulsi Gabbard, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
There's something else I was going to say right there. I lost it. But the other point is so he says he doesn't care what she says. Well, what about the International Atomic Energy Agency? Does that not matter? I mean, what does matter? Here's the best part to just make this point for me. This is New Republic. Trump reveals his amazing intelligence on Iran's supposed nukes. Now, it's making a joke, really. Now, maybe he's got some secret intelligence, but the crazy part is he's trying to convince Americans we should go to war with Iran, or at the very least, they want you to think he's reluctantly being pulled into it, but that's just obscene. It's obvious they've been wanting this from the beginning. They made it very clear right when they got into power. My point is that if he had the evidence that would suggest that they did, he would be waving it in front of you, and you know that as well as I. But when asked about it, they said, in passing, do you have any intelligence that Iran is targeting? And he goes, I have intelligence, and he kind of brushes it off. And then they finish the question. He goes, basically says that Iran's targeting assets. And he goes, we're doing very well. Thank you. Right. We're smart. We know we got intelligence. That's really, solidifies my, it makes you feel great. But it says Trump's director of national intelligence was left scrambling this week after the president said he didn't care about the government's assessment of that Iran was still years away from acquiring a nuclear weapon, saying they're very close, according to him. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard ultimately opted to lie, apparently, and say that she and the president were in total agreement, despite saying the exact opposite. Trump is simply parroting rhetoric from the Israeli government, which has repeatedly touted Iran's nascent nuclear capabilities as a justification for its sweeping military operation there. The U.S. president has given Israel the green light to continue the assault on Iran, leaving the door open for further U.S. intervention, which is all it's really about. You're disregarding everything. You're not showing us what insight you may have. But you're claiming that's enough to allow them to go to war Israel's nuclear armed, guys. Let's not pretend like we don't know that. Samson option we'll point out in a second. Like this, it's just terrifying to me that conservatives are not marching through the streets right now trying to stop this. Now, here's what's interesting. This is from today, I believe, 2 days ago. But it says, inside the clashes between Trump and Gabbard. Now it says, and this is my main point about this. So I believe they were brought on because they thought it would pacify people that wanted to believe his lies. And it's not just unique to Trump. It's just the government's lies. But the point is now he's currently there, so it would be his lies, like they were Biden's lies before it. The problem is that what this shows you is that they only want line towers. They want you to simply go along with what the narrative was. They don't want you to speak out. They don't want you to think for yourself. Now, some of you may think that's what it should be. You got to stay with the president. Okay. Well, I'll just remind you what Teddy Roosevelt said, that it's servile and morally treasonable to the American public to blindly trust the president and go along with what they say. The quote from Teddy Roosevelt. The point is, never blindly trust a politician, or especially the president, especially when you believe in them. Hold them to their feet to the fire more than anybody. My point is, though, that what you swore and promised for why they were there in the first place was because he cared what they had to think, because we're going to get the right people. And now the argument becomes they shouldn't push out. What if they genuinely believe it's a mistake? Are they not supposed to say anything? Well, maybe they should do it privately is the point, right? But they don't want that either. That's the whole thing here. But it says, as President Donald Trump privately mulled joining Israel's campaign against Iran this month, one member of his cabinet sent what he viewed as an audacious attempt to steer him in the opposite direction. At 5:30 a.m. on June 10th, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, tweeted a cryptic 3-minute video warning that political elite and warmongers are, quote, carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers, and that the world is on the brink of nuclear annihilation. Almost like the Gabbard we used to know, right? Probably why that was done, to get you people to go, see, she thinks this is, well, she put that out there. And Trump felt it was a personal attack, apparently. Trump saw the unauthorized video and became incensed, complaining to associates at the White House that she had spoken out of turn, according to 3 people familiar with the episode. 2 of them inside the administration, and all granted anonymity to describe sensitive dynamics, which, of course, could mean that it's all fake. The point is that this obviously feels normal, what we're used to in this dynamic. Now, did she say Trump? No. She simply said that this action, which even according to their own people, it seems Trump claims he doesn't want, right? So for her to say that this action that he says he doesn't want to do is warmongering, and for him to get mad about that, doesn't that show you that he very clearly wants that direction, and that he felt that her doing that was the, trying to say, don't do that? I mean, it's just so transparent to me. You can't pretend he doesn't want this thing, but then he gets mad that she says he shouldn't want the thing that he claims he doesn't want. Obviously, her point, maybe she genuinely wanted to guide them away. Please don't, you're creating war. But they clearly want that. And so he took that as an attack on him, or a slight, basically. Now, her post came a few days after Israel hawks met with Trump at the White House to lobby him to support Israel's attacks on Iran. Of course, typical, right? Israel government entities driving our president to do what they want for their interest against Americans. America first. It says, in the eyes of Trump and some close to him, Gabbard was warning him not to greenlight Israel's attacks on Iran. Trump even expressed his disapproval of her personally, according to 3 people. I don't think he dislikes Tulsi as a person, but certainly the video made him not super hot on her. And he doesn't like it when people are off message. That's the point. Which, guys, I'm not going to pretend like that's new, but just really vivid right now, and recognizing that people want you to think this is a different path. This is the rebel group fighting the deep state. When in reality, it's just the next evolution of the same thing. And it says, the official added that Trump also doesn't appreciate it when people appear to be correcting him. Yeah, real sound leader with no hubris, right? Very, very secure in his own choices. I mean, that's just insecurity at the end of the day. And it says, and that, quote, many took that video as trying to correct the administration position. Or maybe just somebody trying to guide in the path of what she thought was the correct choice. But it says, the man Gabbard endorsed on the campaign trail, who spoke of ending the Ukraine-Russia war on day 1, same with Israel, and ushering in a new era of peace, is striking a different tone is striking a different tone from her now that he's sitting behind the Resolute desk. Quote, I don't care what she said. I think they're very close to having a weapon. A weapon, it's not the same thing as a nuclear bomb, but it says it is a remarkable change in tone from the way the president once talked about the former Democratic representative from Hawaii turned Trump supporter. But in recent months, Trump has increasingly mused about nixing Gabbard's office completely. Discussions about folding it into the CIA, because that's what we all want, right? A bigger, larger, more powerful CIA. My God, guys, let's not forget Trump called, "We need the CIA now." Remember that? Of course, the point was at the same time, the Jones of the world were telling you why the CIA was trying to destroy our country, right? Of course, I found that to be conflicting. I'll grab that really quickly so you can see it. I think it's interesting. And I'll every time I point this out, by the way, you notice if you try to search for the CIA in Trump's account, it won't pop up, which I always find very relevant. He says right here, the CIA must get involved now before it's too late. That doesn't sound like the guy fighting the deep state to me, but maybe I'm crazy. Down here it says, and Trump has, quote, just been kind of down on her in general, said one of the people familiar with Gabbard's interactions with the White House, adding that Trump thinks she, quote, doesn't add anything to the conversation. Well, gee, maybe because she genuinely doesn't want war in some cases, and that doesn't jive with your total war direction. Again, I'm not talking about just Trump, guys. It's just the government. And if you can't recognize how that's never ceased, despite narrative, then you don't want to see it. The bottom line is that she, I think, was a token. And now, for whatever reason, she's just going along to get along, which makes me lose respect for her by the moment. The Gabbard ally added that she is fully on board with what Trump is trying to do with Iran and said she has never let her personal views color the advice she provides the president. Well, what does that mean? Isn't that the whole point? That your understanding of the war you've been in and what you realize about forever wars, shouldn't that flavor your decisions? No, apparently not. You just become an automaton Trump supporter when you sign on with his administration? That seems wild. And it says, nor has she tried to sway Trump to her own point of view. Well, so then what's the point, guys? Why don't you just let Trump do what he wants in it? Well, that apparently seems to be the case. And if you push back, then you get moved away. President Trump was saying the same thing that I said in my annual threat assessment back in March. He says, unfortunately, too many people in the media don't care to actually read what I said, or you're just making that up. I could literally just play what you read, and we can literally see what he's saying that contradicts what you just said. Let's not be stupid. See, this is my point. That's not honest. I lost a lot of respect for her when she sided with Clinton and played the left-right game and changed her side. She's not honest in my opinion, but that's just insane. You're just straight up lying for your team now. And that's exactly what I always call out. What she said then, we just played for you. Are you going to pretend that Trump saying that I don't care what she said is not contradicting that? That's lazy. Trump's comments on Air Force One, however, suggest it's not just the media, obviously. She shouldn't be in that job, Trump former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who said about her, who has his own falling out with Trump. Right. So now Bolton thinks she's bad for the job. Well, gee, maybe it's because she's not it's funny. Maybe it's meant to make you want her to be there. I don't know. Bolton's a warmongering maniac. And then I'll include this again, just this list, because I think it's a good way to see all the different times he's claimed the bombs were 30 seconds away. And then this is the part that I added right before I went live. I just laughed out loud when I saw it because of this. Israeli intelligence believes that Iran could build a nuclear weapon in 15 days, according to a new report. Well, yeah, why wouldn't they have done it by now? Maybe that would, I could make as many jokes you want. That's so stupid, guys. That's insanely stupid. Is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible. The evidence is what matters. And if they've made this same claim at an increasingly rapid, the hair on fire it's going to be tomorrow order going back 2 decades, then maybe we shouldn't take it at face value. Maybe the New York Times should stop being a useful idiot in this whole thing. Now, Patrick Henningsen highlights how Trump has completely gone into this. Like the game where he wasn't involved, that's been completely dispelled, despite the narrative continuing. He says a mentally unstable President Trump determined to start an unprovoked World War III is now demanding an unconditional surrender from Iran. He mocks the so-called supreme leader, threatening, we know exactly where you're hiding. Now, this is from the 17th and before, so it's not brand new. I just want to include this in case you didn't see it. He says, we know where you're hiding, to the leader of the country. Imagine if they said, Trump, we know where you're staying right now. Like that, you can see this is wildly escalate. This is meant to to escalate. This is meant to increase the tension, which is not what you do when you're trying to walk back from a conflict. He says, yesterday, Trump threatened to kill millions in Tehran. He did. Collective punishment and mass murder, also a war crime. He says, time to invoke 25th Amendment now. Stop this criminal. I agree. I mean, I think every one of our presidents for a long time have been worthy of impeachment. The problem here is that people think it's partisan. They think, well, they didn't do it or they did it first. It shouldn't matter. Stop pretending your partisan sides matter and focus on what we're dealing with right now. And do the same thing to the next person, whatever their letter next to their name is, or how irrelevant it all is. To me, this is alarming. Unconditional surrender. So let's pretend like he's totally not taking a side, or let's be real and recognize he's always been on Israel's side from the day this started. Now, Sharman Nawani points out, what happened to this guy? He's asking a genuine question to MAGA. Trump, 2019. The United States has spent $8 trillion fighting and policing the Middle East. Thousands of our great soldiers have died and been badly wounded. Millions of people have died on the other side. Going into the Middle East is the worst decision ever made. Okay, until it's his turn. Right? The reason this was important is because he was being the counterbalance. Look at Obama and they're terrible. I'm going to be the better one. And then came in and did the exact same thing, just like he's doing now. So the question wasn't why he changed, it's why we bought that in the first place, from my opinion. But nonetheless, for those that believed it, why aren't you calling this out, guys? That should be the major point. He's not the same guy. Well, Donald Trump, the U.S. had nothing to do with the attack on Iran, they said on the 15th. Jump forward to the 17th. We now have complete and total control over the skies of Iran. Okay, so obviously you were lied to, guys. Be honest about it. He said, that's the point is that's showing you the game. Glenn, same thing about we have control of the skies, he says, and saying Iran it had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does. Now, I don't even know that's true. It very well could just be another manufactured lie, because I don't believe the supremacy of U.S.-made weapons is necessarily all it's cracked up to be. But he says, with this use of we, along with the other multiple deranged tweets today, issuing decrees to Iran about what the U.S. will do if they don't surrender, Glenn says, I assume we can all dispense with the myth that this isn't a U.S.-Israel war. Be for it or against, but just be honest. It is Israel and the United States. Yes. But dishonest people will be dishonest. Here's the clip I played to start. I mean, it really just blows me away with the fact that unless they just somehow don't know, which would blow me away, they must know what even their supporters think of what Israel's doing. The genocide they're committing in multiple locations, the starvation tactics, the ongoing support in their country for rape and torture. I mean, it's just insane. And yet, here's what Trump had to say about Netanyahu. Oh, hold on. I had it muted accidentally.
Mr. President, can you share some of what you've told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
He said, keep going. What do I say? I speak to him every day. He's a good man.
So he said, keep going. Just so that's clear. That's been reported widely, but keep going. Meaning bombing civilian targets in Iran.
Doing a lot. Been very unfairly treated by his country, I think. Very unfairly treated.
Have you given him any indication that you may seek to aid them more than you have already?
No, I haven't.
Right, because he's completely aiding them entirely, right? They're in complete lockstep. So there's no need to do more. They're already everywhere they can go. The point here clearly is you do more, continue the thing that you're pretending you don't want or we're not providing. He needs to give his base the illusion of resistance when he can, right? But poorly treated. I mean, guys, the guy is hated by everybody. This is the most obvious part of this conversation. He was hated dramatically by his own country before they got here. And his own articles in Israeli media would report that he would start wars just to basically give himself more time. It's not a secret, guys. It's so publicly known. And this is the guy you defend. This is the guy you say is poorly, given a report. I mean, you are just clearly in lockstep with defending the Israeli government at all costs to your own expense. I don't understand it unless he is being controlled or unless he is in line with them to the complete, at the expense of everything American. I mean, make sense of it for me, guys. You know what this person is doing. The whole world can see it. I'm not talking to the people out there screaming Trump's the best guy in the world in the chat. Those people are never going to say something different. For those of you that are honest and are just at least considering whether or not this is the wrong direction, how do you make sense of that? The guy is one of the most hated people on the planet, and he's standing there taking his side. If you were a politician, even, you would go, well, so you give an answer that's somewhere in the middle. Even Trump does that. But here, I think it shows you everything.
So far, he's doing it.
Can you share some of what you've told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
He said, Keep going. What do I say? I speak to him every day. He's a good man, doing a lot. Been very unfairly treated by his country, I think. Very unfairly treated.
Have you given him any indication that you may seek to aid them more than you have already?
No, I haven't. So far, he's doing a good job. He has been treated very unfairly.
Good job.
You know, he's a wartime president, and he's going through this nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Nonsense meaning all the crimes he's committed. He's indicted for bribery, for corruption, right? But poor, you know, what do you say?
A wartime president, and he's going through this nonsense.
This is nonsense. Yeah, how dare he be accused of the crimes he's committing? Ugh. It's exactly what they are. They believe they're above the law, right? It's how they look at it.
It's ridiculous.
Sounds like you got a good agree with him.
David Icke says Trump is a deeply disturbed, narcissistic psychopath with the mind of a prepubescent child owned by his authoritarian daddy in the shadows. The bombast comes from him trying to cover up his insecurity and fear of his daddy if he doesn't do what he's told. It is to make out he's in charge when he isn't, and he knows that. Look at him and what he does from that perspective, and it all makes sense. Well, worth considering. Well, they haven't even slowed down. As of today, they are still loading up planes with massive loads of cargo and military gear for Israel. You're continuing to support Israel's wars against whoever they fight right now, both with Americans on the ground in multiple locations, as well as your tax dollars, even though most people in this country do not agree with any of this. And here we are. On top of that, Candace Owens points out that they're going crazy trying to convince people this makes sense, because I think they're failing. Not just because I'm saying that, I think that's consistently a pattern right now. They have continued to put weight into what they think is their propaganda, both the U.S. and Israel, and they continue to fail. And I think that's why they're trying to drive us into a control structure that doesn't require your consent anymore. Here, Candace points out the level of propaganda coming out of Israel is beyond parity. They are reporting that an Iranian, this is just one of many, by the way, they're reporting that an Iranian apparently wrote a letter begging them to bomb a news station, which, by the way, they did. Laura laughed about women getting bombed on and then went later and made a post about how we should defend women in Iran. Typical, right? Somebody called her out going, "You clown, you just laughed at them being bombed." You're just, people, they're all gross and hypocrites. Begging them to bomb a news station. It says, curiously, the Iranian chose to write the letter in perfect English. Not Farsi, Arabic, or Hebrew, but English. Can you imagine why? Sort of like the white helmets jackets being written in English, because it's meant to propagandize you, America. They need you. That's what the point is. Are you really going to pretend like this is a letter written to them about like this? You're going to write it's just so it's like Israeli propaganda the whole time. It's about a calendar they claim is some kind of a terror organization. It's a calendar, or a CD-ROM you can buy on Amazon. They claim is a book about. I mean, they're lazy. I just don't get why anybody even still pretends like we can't see through it. And of course, here's where we are now. Same old propaganda. That's my point. It hasn't stopped. Time magazine from 2003, remaking the Middle East. It says we're not exaggerating when we say the same playbook. Look at this. Life after Saddam. A look inside Bush's high-risk plan to occupy Iraq and remake the Middle East. Yeah, how'd that work out? Well, guess what, guys? This is today. The new Middle East. Not a joke. With his face going away. I mean, it is exactly the same thing. They don't know how to do something different. Show them that you don't believe them. Now, on the division part, this is just really standout to me. Going off the Gabbard discussion, the point is that this is a little bit about Tucker Carlson, too. It's when asked about his supporters being divided, Trump literally says, no, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. Meaning that he is America first, not the other way around. And I said, as I said, it's Trump first, not America first. Far too many of his supporters, for far too many of them. Here's the clip.
The Tucker Carlson, Senator Ted Cruz interview, it seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of dividing a lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me.
No, yes, guys, just to be clear, yes. The whole world can see that, or at least American conversation. It's not a secret, guys. It's all clear. But so the fact that he can't even be honest about that shows you how ridiculous this all is. Yes, obviously, if every one of his major people are online talking about the divide and trying to tell you that it's a manufactured ploy from the left, so clearly it does exist. But that's just how he operates. He's too I guess, insecure to ever acknowledge a slight at all in the slightest way. That's just a child.
Ted Cruz interview, it seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of dividing a lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. Tucker's a nice guy. He called and apologized the other day.
I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't even happen. Apologize for what? For telling his opinion? That just kind of doesn't make sense to me. But what are we talking about? Your supporters want you're telling me there's not a single Trump supporter who doesn't want Iran to have, who wants to let Iran, rather, to make it clear, who's tired of the lies about Iran, or rather doesn't want Israel or the U.S. to be involved. They're everywhere, guys. Everywhere. People right now I can see that are still adamantly Trump supporters who voted for him, who vote for him again, but yet don't agree with that. I mean, the point is, you're either one of two people. You're either a cat turd who blindly supports what Trump says no matter what, even if it contradicts what you claim you want, or you have an opinion. And in that case, you're not part of the team. That's just simple. There's plenty of other categories, but in their mind, that's the reality of this. You're either Trump first or you're America first, or anything else. Wherever they are, it's a line drawn in the sand.
Because he thought he said things that were a little bit too strong. And I appreciated that. And Ted Cruz is a nice guy. I mean, he's been with me for a long time. I'd say once the race was over, he's been with me ever since, right? But very simple. If they think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then they should oppose me. But nobody thinks it's okay.
You see, it's not even as, guys, are we really pretending like the division is about whether or not they should have a bomb? See, this is how lazy and incompetent this is. The argument is wildly nuanced about lies and propaganda of Israel involvement, about whether we're going to war. It's not just a binary discussion about yes bomb or no bomb, because the evidence, as we know, shows they don't have it in the first place. But he's trying to drive you into to create a division tactic of Americans to where we're discussing whether or not they should have it, not whether or not even exist in the first place. And let's be clear, the reality of it, regardless, is every country in the world has the legal right to the same things as any other country. So it's all insane to me. The point is that this is about trying to create that division.
People that I don't want to fight either. I'm not looking to fight. But if it's a choice between fighting and them having a nuclear weapon, you have to do what you have to do.
There it is again, right? So it's only two things. Either it's about them having a bomb or us fighting. And so I don't want to. That's not true. You don't need to break it down as either we're fighting them in war or we're stopping them from getting a bomb. It's ridiculous.
Maybe we won't have to fight. Don't forget, we haven't been fighting.
See, that's just a lie. There's a reason he has to reiterate that in a clumsy way, because he really makes to make sure you know that. We all know that's not true, Trump. We all know that.
We add a certain amount of genius to everything, but we haven't been fighting.
It's so funny.
Israel's done a very good job of that. But
of crimes and terrorism and murdering people. Great job.
We'll see what happens. The bottom line is they can't have nuclear. And if I can't imagine that Ted Cruz said it's okay for Iran to have nuclear, including Tucker. I don't think Tucker says it's okay. The problem is then they get themselves into a thing. They don't want them to have nuclear, but then they say, well, we don't want to fight. Well, you're going to have to make a choice, because it's possible that you're going to have to fight for them not to have nuclear.
See right there. He couldn't even hold back from doing the same thing again. So it's ultimately, we don't want to fight, but we have to if they go that way. But that's not even the consistent opinion from people in this country. It's not binary. The reality is it's not our place to do any of this unless we pretend we're the thing you claim we don't want, which is being the policeman of the world, and basing that on the lies from an Israeli government that's been lying for decades, that your own team tells you isn't the reality. How do you not see this for what it is, guys? This guy is clumsily driving you in this direction and acting like it's a binary choice. It's like everything else they do. It never stops being the same thing. That's the regime change two-step, guys. Now, here is Trump slaps back at Tucker Carlson for suggesting he betrayed America first for Israel. I'm the one that decides that, is what he said. It says, well, considering that I'm the one that developed America first, and considering that the term wasn't used until I came along, talk about hubris, I think I'm the one that decides that. So, Trump, you don't get to decide what is America first based on what you're doing. That's what he just said, right? I am the one, so I'm the one to get... The reality is simply that because Tucker has a different opinion about what America first is, he's suddenly no longer on the team, according to people in the community. Tucker, like Cat Turd and the rest, these major million follower accounts, are all like crazily going after Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. I never liked them. I always knew they were X, Y, and Z, despite 20 posts 30 seconds ago telling you how they're all part of the same team. The same thing they did with all of them, right? How in one post he's over here going, electric cars are going to ruin the world. And over here they're going, yay, support Elon. They're just children, and they will go along with whatever they're told to. Speaking of children that go along with whatever based on partisan nonsense, here's Nick Sorter saying, now, pro-Iran protests, in quotes. Okay, so they're not protesting? These guys are ridiculous. Have taken over the streets of New York. No, they're peacefully marching through the streets. You can look for yourself right now. They're simply marching. But because he doesn't like what they're marching for, deport them all. Do you not realize how stupid these people are, or just that weaponized? Like, you're literally doing the thing. Like, you're calling for deportations of people who aren't breaking the law. Are you that stupid? I mean, it's just insane to me how blatant this is. But he goes, it seems they've largely abandoned Palestine and are now in bed with Iran. I should move in and round them up. Oh, yeah? Well, looks like I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically all Palestinian flags except those two. One right there and the one in the beginning. So I simply said, maybe you should learn your flags, bud. Or maybe just not be such a blind, uninformed follower. Just my personal take. I just think it's embarrassing. What does it say? State of Israel? Oh, yeah, that's the other point, by the way. So apparently Nick Sorter hates Jews because these are all Jewish people marching right there. I'm being funny. I'm not stupid like that. The point is that this is a mixed Muslim, Jewish, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, pro-Iranian, all of them marching to say that we don't agree with what they're doing. But apparently that's enough to deport Americans. And that's who's there. I mean, can we not see how cartoonish this is? How contradictory this man is? All of them doing this, it's the same as the rest. They are going along with whatever the agenda is. They're Trump first, not America first. Calling to deport people who are simply acting through the Constitution or within or acting under constitutionally protected acts to deport them, that is anti-America. That is undermining the ideals of this country. But apparently not, because if they have that kind of flag, then they hate this country. And then so you guys are the ones. You are either useful idiot agents of another country, or you're actively doing so for money or some other nuance therein. I just hope people can call this out even more. They didn't abandon anything. They recognized, first of all, there's plenty of Palestinian flags, was my point. He apparently doesn't know the difference between the Iranian flag and the Palestinian flag. But the point is, it's a larger issue that connects to all of it. Israel is literally occupying, bombing, and trying to subjugate all of these countries simultaneously. How dare they stand up and say, we shouldn't support that? But according to Nick, that makes them jihadist, illegal aliens, or whatever dumb thing he's trying to suggest right here. Hands off Iran is something that's been around for a long time from people on all sides of the paradigm simply calling for them not to create another war. Isn't that what you guys all pretended you wanted? I'm just so exhausted with the grifters out there that are so blatantly manipulative, but doesn't slow down people screaming about them. Now, to the point about the manipulation overlap. I've shown you this before. The religious extremism, the point about the lies about the hijab and all these different stuff. Here's a picture you might have seen before. Now, for those that don't know, you might reflexively go, that's a burqa in a Muslim country, right? Now, a woman completely covered in all black. The only place that exists are these crazy Muslim countries, right? No, that's in Israel. And I'll show you the article. And this is what's important, guys, is that people have misunderstandings about how this stuff works in the world. Now, realize that women in Israel, in Orthodox communities, in many cases, are forced to wear head coverings. It's just a different style, but it's the same kind of head cover. It's the same idea. Only covers the top of your head. That's all it really comes down to. Now, in this case, there are more extreme versions of it where people have to wear, they decide that it's more appropriate to wear the full cover. Now, this does exist in Muslim countries, but this is in Israel. It says, no, this is not a Dementor or modern installation. This isn't even, as you're more likely to expect, a Muslim woman wearing a burqa. This was on a sweltering day in Yikov Liederman. This is in Israel, in Bet Shemesh, a Jewish woman and her two daughters. Now, this is Forward, a Jewish independent nonprofit. Now, my point is, I shouldn't have to stress this. The point is, this is not that unique. There are plenty of examples. The problem is that people have been so influenced and controlled and manipulated by Israeli propaganda they don't even know the difference, or they don't care to ask. It's simply like this manipulator did, used to call out Muslims, even though it's not actually of a Muslim. This is Tommy Robinson, who says, this has no place in the 21st century. Well, okay, let me ask you something. If I came out today and said, Judaism, there's no place for Judaism in the 21st century, do you know how fast I would get censored off this platform? Now, censorship shouldn't apply. People can say what they want, but I would personally argue that that statement's disgusting, but they have a right to say it, or I would in that context. If that was me, I wouldn't do that, though. My point is, for him to come out and say there's no place for this and point to a Jewish woman in a burqa, it's almost as if the platform's like, oh, he meant Muslims, so it's okay. But it's a Jewish person he's pointing to. I just find that imperfect. It encapsulates the whole point in one thing. One, that this platform completely allows that, which is not surprising. But on top of that, that if it were in another context, it would be censored. But the reality being it is actually about a Jewish person. So I think Tommy Robinson probably just didn't even know, doesn't care. It's irrelevant. And this person lies and says, woman in Islam with choice. You realize this is the problem, is that they actually think that, or they don't even care. And you're pointing to a Jewish woman. But it never seems to break through. And of course, these posts get dramatically suppressed. Like everything else that gets, I've retweeted this, reshared this like 10 times over the last probably, since February, 8,000 views out of 76,000 people that follow this channel. Like, it's very obvious these things just are suppressed. But I said, hey, Tommy Robinson, hey, let's do it again. See if we finally get some reach on it. Probably not. Hey, Tommy Robinson, will you still call this out as having no place in the 21st century once you realize it's actually a picture of a Jewish woman in Israel, as forward covered below? Or will you just delete it like most expect? I posted the same thing down here with similarly, a little more likes at the very least, but nope. I just think that's really compelling. It shows you the lies of all of this. Now, here is Candace Owens making an excellent point about religious extremism. And she says the same people say Iran can't have a nuke because their religious fundamentalists are the same people who hold the heretical belief that we must support Israel's nonstop campaign of murder, blackmail, land theft, bombing, and starvation of the innocent because God will bless those who bless the 1948 created nation of Israel, or that God allows this or wants this. Oh, so exactly what you're accusing them of. Now, you could argue that there's very clearly a theocratic situation in Iran, but point to me where that's led into other attacks. Where has that led to subjugation, regime change, rape, murder, torture? Please. Now, the arguments of what they've done to their own people, if you have evidence that makes these things clear, I would love to see it. And I will never dismiss the possibility that the government would be capable of any of those things. But in my experience over the years, what I get shown, I end up rapidly breaking down. So in my experience, I'm a bit jaded to the things they're lying about, but I always consider it. The point, though, is that what you can see, the religious extremism in Israel is at insane levels. And they're using it to overthrow, to murder, to rape, and to torture. So maybe we should focus on that a bit. But here's what Candace has to say about it.
Really became a turning point for me was recognizing that I didn't even know the beginning of the 1948 story. I had assumed that the world would have been moral enough so as, even if the United Nations and the UK determined via the Balfour Declaration that, hey, war happens and now we're giving this and we're establishing Israel, I had assumed that they would have done that morally, that they would have said, here is the money for the home that you have lived in for thousands of years. The property that you have lived in. Here is money for that, but you have to go. That's not what happened. The Bella Hadid story is stunning. These people came on ships holding up signs about World War II saying, please, we're refugees, let us into your home.
This is a wild part of the story, which gets often left out, but is easily provable by UN documents and others, that they welcomed them in. They welcomed in the people. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. What she's going to talk about is welcoming in the Jewish community into Palestine. Now, it's unfair to argue that those same people the point is that you can see that Zionism, through that connection, then took advantage of them and expelled them and ethnically cleansed them. But I guarantee there was an overlap there, but realize there was also Jewish people that were there that objected to what was happening to the people of Palestine. That's important to remember.
That's not what happened. The Bella Hadid story is stunning. These people came on ships holding up signs about World War II saying, please, we're refugees, let us into your home. And the Palestinians opened their doors to them. This is the story of Muhammad Hadid and Bella Hadid. Yeah, the model, Gigi Hadid. He was an infant. His mother had just given birth. They allowed these refugees, these Polish refugees, to live in their homes as refugees because they wanted to help them following a world war. And then one day they came back to their houses and the doors were locked. They came home, the doors were locked, and guns were being held, and they were told, leave right now, or some soldiers are going to come murder you. Do you guys understand? Just go through that in your head. Wherever it is that you live right now in the world, imagine your family has lived on that land for hundreds and hundreds of years. That this has been your home for hundreds of years. And then you say, oh, you know what? The Ukrainian war is happening right now. I feel really bad. I'm going to allow a Ukrainian to live in my house, maybe here in Tennessee, live in my house. And you allow them and you share with them. And you do this out of the kindness of your heart, right? Because you are being taken over, perhaps by the Spirit of Christ and charity. And one day you come back to your house and the doors are locked. And those refugees that you let in are telling you that if you try to open that door, you are going to die. That is how the land was given to them. That is a fact. No one can dispute that. There was no money. There was no trade. There was no conversation. They were effectively hijacked in their own homes. So the entire story of Israel has been immoral, okay? And it has really hinged upon our ignorance. We have all been ignorant.
It's true, guys. It's very easy to prove. I've been covering this for a very long time. You know, I'm glad she's finally becoming aware of it, as she's testified to herself about how she didn't know this before. But recognize many of us have been calling this out for a very long time, to our own detriment. But it's important to understand how clear this is and realize, just like the same point is, that there are people that currently live in Israel that should not be just swept up into everything. There are people that were born and generations have come around. And there's a very large movement of people, not the majority, but a large movement of people in Israel that call this out, that want peace for the Palestinians, that want to, it's very clear, not the majority. But there's also an Orthodox Jewish community that's calling that Zionism is not Judaism and that they want peace for the Palestinians as well. These are two separate things that are on the same side of that conversation. Still not the majority, but very important to understand, because the other side of the problem is where people then say every Israeli is a monster and a terrorist. That's the same problem. Even if it's the majority, it's the same problem, guys. You have to be objective about this. There's plenty of people that are on the side of what we want to happen here. An honest, amicable end to the war where people get, a two-state solution is the only real solution from here, because giving it all back to Palestine hurts the people that have grown up here that don't want no one part in it. The other way around takes the land all away from Palestine. And most honest people, including Palestinians, want that two-state solution. And it's now becoming clear, hopefully to those barely paying attention, that it's always been Netanyahu and the Israeli government that have been trying to stop this. I mean, Netanyahu in the current context, but it's been a long time since he's been there. But the Israeli government, going back as long as you want to look in this conversation, has been making sure that they created the very context and conflict that stopped that from happening. We saw this during every phase of the fake ceasefire dynamic from Biden to Trump. It's the same thing.
And it's time to stop, because once you know the truth, now it is your burden to carry, okay? Yep. If you are truly ignorant and you support something, as I did back when I was a Zionist, hitting the ground, talking about Israel, tweeting about Israel and how we must support Israel, then that's okay. That's going to be acceptable, because one day we're all going to have to account before our Creator. I have to hope that is going to be acceptable, that it was truly ignorance and I believed that I was doing the right thing. But you now know this is not the right thing. And if you keep doing that, thing out of fear, all right, out of, a jerk knee reaction, because you're scared of being canceled. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be you when you meet your maker. I wouldn't want to be you when you have to stand before the Lord and account for what you allowed to take place, because those children are dying. They are being burned to death. They had been carpet bombed. The access to those images, it's at your fingertips. And to the people who really do believe that God's chosen people rape, murder, destroy, pillage, lie, deceive, blackmail, Jeffrey Epstein, all of our politicians, buy, purchase,
just think about all that. I mean, that you can't deny. I mean, these things are highly documented going back decades. And again, that's not every Israeli or every Jewish person, but my God, how can we pretend that the ones who are so vocally trying to claim that moniker are in any way, anything they claim? Think about how much that's been everything she listed off right there. That's the opposite of what they're trying to present, and there's a reason for that. This overlaps with a lot of very important things in religious context that I'm not going to go into on the show, because this is not where I talk. I don't think it's actually. It's not helpful from my perspective to overlap my religious perspectives with the reporting, because this is about facts, not faith. But like her and plenty of others, they do the same thing. You guys can decide. It's up to you. I'm just simply saying I'm not going to go into that. But the point is, think about all that we can prove and think about the way that they want to present themselves to the world. It's a very stark and chilling reality.
Threaten, manipulate. Goodness, you may really want to crack open a Bible if you think that those are the signs of God's chosen people. Shoot presidents in broad daylight. Yeah, no. It shouldn't take you a theology course. You just take a little bit of common sense to tell you that no, that is not what God's chosen people do.
Yeah. And just in case you forgot, but I still have on right now, we know it was real. This was a coin that somebody sent to me, 1927, Palestine. It's very important to me now. And I just think it's important to think about every time I hear it now. You know, it's like just to remember what these people are currently going through. And that what, you know, that if it wasn't for you right now listening and your effort to show somebody and get awareness around this and talk about it, that, you know, I mean, imagine what would have happened. Despite, I mean, look at what already happened. Now imagine how this could have gone if nobody even knew what was going on. That's why it's important what we do. But I just want to include that because we've been lied to our whole lives. Now, Keith Woods points out what Donald Trump posted about Mike Huckabee, the one I couldn't remember his name. He says, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, Keith says this, is texting Trump to tell him God wants him to join the war on Iran. This is not a joke. Comparing Trump's opportunity now to Truman in 1945 before he nuked Japan. I mean, I can't stand they keep using this argument. Japan was in retreat. It's very publicly known at this point, and they decided to use the bomb anyway for multiple reasons. But that's insane. That's the kind of sociopathy we're talking about. So the point is, Trump posted what Mike Huckabee texted him, and here's what it says. Mr. President, and this is confirmed. This is on his Truth Social. God spared you in Butler. Again, ask Brad Miller what he thinks about that. I mean, guys, I can't believe looking back, I mean, I said it then, but it was obviously too much in the moment for people to think about. There's so much obvious manipulation around that event. It's insane to me. But it says, to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. My God. The decisions on your shoulders I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there's only one voice that matters. His voice. There's stuff like this that terrifies me. I am a Christian. The fact that this person thinks that God is, what that means is that no matter what Trump does, God wanted that. How's that work? So when he robs and steals and cheats or helps them murder people in genocide, that's all okay then? Apparently, Mike Huckabee it is. Mike Huckabee supports the genocide. So either this guy is, you know, people like this are either adherent to something other than the God that we know, or they're not actually what they claim. Because my God, how you can look at people being murdered in mass slaughter, no matter what the rationale, and pretend like it makes sense. It's just, I don't care if every one of them are human shield. It still is not something anyone would support if they actually have these ideals. The point is that he's trying to convince him that, you know, your God is guiding you. That's what Israeli, biblical, Zionist, maniacal people think. And it says, I am your appointed servant in this land, and I am available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. Just creepy. He goes, no president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours, not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice. Creepy. And to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabee. Who are the religious extremists here again? I mean, realize, guys, it's funny that people are so afraid to question these things because you somehow feel like that shows you're questioning your religion. How would that possibly make sense? Do you realize the major things that, like the major, you know, even the Crusades, the major events of the past, some of the most horrible things that have happened, murder in the name of God, were done in the name of God. The KKK acts in the name of God. You have to realize how many people who even may think they're doing that act in the name of God. And just because someone does that and maybe even believes it does not mean they're virtuous, that they're correct. On top of that, you have people that pretend that in ways in history that have caused horrible things. So it's just alarming to me that we even pretend this makes sense. He posted this. In a political context, we're talking about being sent by God and talking about going to war in God's name. This is the beginning of the worst things in history. I just can't believe we're pretending this makes sense. And that was actually before I was going to include this, so you can look at the Balfour Declaration that she mentioned, just in case you didn't know that. It was very literal. The British government literally gave them this territory. So how you pretend somehow God was involved is ridiculous. But now Gerald Celente simply points to the same thing. And this is the guy from Electronic Intifada, ASA, saying, very worrisome Trump post, True Social, screenshot of the text from insane Christian Zionist Mike Huckabee, in which hints strongly to Trump that should nuke Iran. He says, remember, sheep, that it's the Iranians who are led by religious fanatics. Ted Cruz, pointing back to the discussion that everyone was talking about between the two of them and Tucker. And it says, last night, Tucker acknowledged as a Christian the biblical mandate to bless Israel, but suggested the government of Netanyahu wasn't the biblical Israel. This should be on a Saturday Night Live skit. This guy should be made fun of for the rest of it. Are you actually going to stand here a straight face and tell us that you believe make sure I get the exact. Which one? It's right here. Hold on. 1917. Okay, 1917. Are we going to pretend that in 1917, when Britain gave the territory to Zionists and they decided to call it Israel, that then became the biblical Israel? Or are you saying it always was and was somehow magically in their essence before they decided to steal it from the Palestinians? I mean, you realize that just the word Israel does not therefore prove that it is the biblical reference of Israel. I mean, you guys, it either doesn't know that, which is terrifying of how fanatic these people are, or he just thinks that you're that stupid, that simple, or that afraid to call it out because you'll be called out by not being Christian somehow by other blind supporters of religious political Christianism or whatever you want to call it. And he says, exactly right. And yes, Tucker really argued that when the Bible says Israel, it doesn't mean Israel. I'm just speechless at how stupid this is. The idea that you can pretend that because they called it that therefore it is the doc. What are we doing? How are these people actually in power? And then I shared what Voice of Rabbi said here, which is important. An Orthodox Jewish community, a very large one, in fact, that says the notion that modern Israel is the Jewish people has no basis in Judaism. They're right. It doesn't. Even Zionists don't believe this. They don't, nor do they uphold the Torah. Judaism is a religion, not a political movement or a nationalist project. It's unfortunate our politicians can't seem to grasp that. I don't think they grasp it. I think he's doing this because Israel pays him to, quite frankly. The thing is just, this is insanely obvious because you have to realize not even Zionists believe there's something different than the original. Everything, they lie to you as a matter of policy to get you involved with whatever they want to accomplish. And there is no more fanatical, at least stated believers of this than the people that are currently stacked in the Congress. Now I say stated because some of them just say it because they're paid to, but these people, it scares me. Now, here's an example of one of these rabbis. Now, this one, Adam Green does good work on this and highlighting a lot of the internal overlap of it, but also, by the way, as I've interviewed him about discussions of other Abrahamic religions, which is worth your consideration. But my point in this, or his point, is the discussion of what these rabbis are saying and how that overlaps with what these people in politics believe, like the Hackabees and like the people in the Knesset that say Trump is sent by God. Like they believe this stuff. And the reality being that this guy is one of these more Western overlap. But the point is, there is a lot of them, as he's covered, that really believe this. Now, does that mean that every politician does? Well, that's for you to decide. There's plenty of evidence showing that they do. But as David says, David Icke, the mentality behind Israel, insanity doesn't begin to describe it. Here's what Adam was covering.
Remaining nations of Esav and Ishmael to fight it out over Israel. We need the remainder.
We need the Christians and the Muslims to fight it out over Israel. They want us to destroy each other. It's just so unreal. How many examples do we have to show that this is what like all the rabbis are saying before people start waking up and pay attention to this and how dangerous this is? Son of Mars, you like postmodern pagan renaissance? I do too.
We need the remaining nations of Esav and Ishmael to fight it out over Israel. We need the remainder of those two to then join forces and bring everyone that's left to Israel to try and destroy Mashiach and the chosen people. This is Gog and Magog. All these things they're going to develop into World War III. After that, you're going to have Gog and Magog, right? Then we need afterwards to purify the land from the dead and melt down all the weapons of war and so on and so forth. So many things have to take place. And then in the end, and the Lord shall become king over all the earth. On that day shall the Lord be one and his name one. No question.
Now, this is the end times biblical prophecy stuff, guys. Huckabee, Hegseth, these guys are adherent. They're very clearly, openly in line with this. That's why they were picked by whoever put them there. Now, realize that there's a lot of this. The main Zionist cabinet, the Shemotrich and Ben Gvir, they believe this stuff. At least they state that. They're acting through that. And if you don't find it alarming that they need the collapse of this country or the West or the implosion of what we in order for them to gain what Mike Huckabee and Hegseth want for Israel, then how can you be America first if you believe that? It's not hard to recognize. People just don't want to hear it because it's either too much, it's alarming, it counters what they want to believe, but it's there. It's right in front of you.
Question: who's what? Who's that? My truth, your truth, one truth, emet, one name, God. So all these things still need to take place, and our window just shrank even more, you see. And it can happen rapidly over the course of a year, or if we're less fortunate, it could drag on for a few more years. Remember the Vilna Gaon almost 300 years ago. He said that the final war would take place, it would take between 7 and 12 minutes. Also the Chafetz Chaim, before World War I, he was talking about 3 world wars. He said the first one is going to be catastrophic. The second one is going to make the first one seem like it was a kindergarten.
And they were saying this before even World War I.
The third World War is going to make the second World War seem like it's nothing at all. Whoa. And he said, and that one is what's going to take place between 7 and 12 minutes. And so we know it's a war of buttons right now. This whole garbage, you fire a thing on me, I fire a thing, that's not war. War is not taking place. We will know when war is taking place, okay? I don't know if these videos are going to be going on if war when it actually breaks out. We'll see, okay? So that's obvious.
I mean, I can understand why this matters, even if this is just his opinion alone. He's simply arguing from a religious perspective and how he interprets the text, which, as Adam covers, is not unique in the slightest. They truly believe this. They believe that this is that they need to drive into reality this war. And he's highlighting between Christians and, really it's come to represent the United States, the West, and they are all openly discussing these things. I just think this needs to break through in the American conversation to realize at the very least that some of these people in the U.S. cabinet genuinely believe this stuff.
Obviously, a nuclear war, which simply did not
see through it all in the chat. How many subs does this guy have?
Exist back then. How would he know? Because he's awesome. But this is sure hinted in Zechariah 14:12. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the nations who besieged Jerusalem. His flesh will waste away while he still stands on his feet. His eyes will waste away in their sockets, and his tongue shall waste away in his mouth. Fallout, maybe? Besieged, tzavu. This is the past tense. That's anyone who came against Israel throughout history. This is what will happen to them.
They can't wait to literally evaporize. Is that the right word? Evaporize?
Evaporate. Here's another one that he shared. This is one I've shared before as well. And he simply said, who could have imagined the mass immigration into European countries would end like this? So this I should have technically played first, but it's important to start where we are now. This is the one before it, right? The argument of creating the mass migration, which then creates the justification for what we're talking about now. Now, again, I'm not saying this could just be their interpretation of what's happening. I just want you to understand that there are people within high levels of power in the U.S. and Israel that argue that this has to be driven to happen. And then we start seeing all these things happen. It was just worth your consideration. This is very strange.
Days, you're going to need the iron of Esav, which represents Edom, which is the West, Europe, and the Americas, to get intermixed with Ishmael, which is basically Arabs and Muslims. How in the world was this ever going to happen if not for this refugee crisis? At the end of days, you're going to have this intermixing between Esav, Edom, which is the West, and the East, which is the Muslims and the Arabs, making this through this influx into the world. They're going to have a far larger birth rate than the indigenous people there, and they're going to sort of conquer by number. And there are many different sources for this, where there will be many, many people killed and so on and so forth. So the idea of having these refugees come into Europe, it's no longer a matter of whether it's right or wrong. It's just simply a fulfillment of what it was meant to be all along. This is the fulfillment of the Hazal and the prophecies. This has to happen, and this is just another sign that we are nearing, the completion of this tikkun of the entire world.
But we know one thing, right? That when it comes to the classic Rome, which is Europe, they're finished.
And you don't have to be a prophet or a great analysis for that. You have to open the TV or the internet and see that exactly what was prophesied then, that the sons of Ishmael are going to go and cause havoc around the world. So France is completely barbecued. England is next. Now half of Europe is completely half dead. Now look what's going on in America. So, now in a country near you.
Asking what's going to be with the Goyim when Mashiach comes. Will they be destroyed and annihilated? Someone asked, who cares? Okay. As a nation, they'll cease to exist, even as individuals. Every individual, no survivors. Not only as a nation, they'll cease to exist, even as individuals. In modern terminology, they call it cultural genocide. They'll be annihilated. They basically learn there's going to be cultural genocide. That, the Goyim as they exist as Goyim, b'fnei atzmam, that's done with. Batul u'mavutul.
Wild. Now, I want to stress again, there's plenty of people who are Jewish who do not adhere to this maniacal biblical Zionism. There's plenty of people that are not Jewish that also Christian Zionists, right? So I think that easily shows you that it's not about one thing alone. And I obviously think that there's a Zionism overlap to this that very clearly drives this ideology. I mean, I think it's very obvious, but you guys can decide for yourselves what you think. But it's obvious to recognize that people in positions of power believe these things. Now, there's an article from 2021 that I thought was important to include from Robert. Israel's threats against Iran are really aimed at the United States. In a lot of ways, I hope that will reach people. Worth your reading. It's an important article about, then and as well as what's happening now. I'll also include just the reference to Seymour Hersh's book called The Samson Option, which we need to understand what this truly means. It's more than just the one thing, but the major idea is simply that they have a nuclear arsenal, yes, and that they have the plan for, should they recognize they're about to fail, that they will launch nuclear weapons even against their allies. Now, it's abstract. There's different opinions around it, but this is a real thing. Okay. And this is, I argue, one of the reasons why there are countries, I think, that recognize that they are actually this belligerent and would do that. And maybe that guides their policy. It's hard to know. Now, a couple of points to end with. One, I just wanted to reiterate that as this is all going on, that the back and forth, which as far as I can tell is still happening, it's important to understand that Israel has literally created a circumstance where the targets that any other country would go after are buried and deliberately around or within or under civilian infrastructure. Exactly what they accuse everybody else of. I mean, in the most obvious of context, because that puts their targets under civilian. They know what they're doing. And as even Glenn pointed out in 2021, this is a New York Times article. Israel built their IDF Supreme Command post in the heart of Tel Aviv, buried beneath blocks of civilian buildings. Called it the Fortress of Zion. It was deliberately placed so it couldn't be attacked without seeming to target civilian sites. Even Haaretz did a whole thing about this, how it was human shields. That's what it is. Then Dan Cohen points out Israel will fly citizens in right now during the airstrikes from Iran, but won't let them flee the country. They've even posted this publicly, acting like it's somehow, they're literally not letting Israelis leave the country in any context, but they're letting them fly back home. He says it's a trap. I agree. It says Zionists want to maximize human sacrifice for propaganda value, precisely as they accuse Palestinians of doing. Dan Cohen, a Jewish person himself, adamantly calling this out because he understands the difference between Zionism and Judaism. Efrat Fengenson, Israeli, actually she was in intelligence in the IDF. Israel forbids airlines to fly Israelis out of Israel once rescue flights are allowed. It says, this is from Hebrew translation, it says the state has taken away citizens' right to escape. I mean, guys, this is actually crazy. This is real time and even being called out by Israelis, and yet still the West can't acknowledge this story. Here is another overlap to it, which is disgusting. Footage shows Israelis preventing the Thai and other foreign workers from going into the bunkers. Despite them being right there, the door's right there, they won't let them in because that is how a lot of these Zionist Israelis think. These people are lesser than. Even the Ethiopian Jews are treated like they're second-class citizens. Mint-Press News reports indicate chaos has erupted inside a secure bomb shelter. One they're boxing out from the other, any other foreign workers. But it says where Prime Minister Netanyahu's family were located in this one, settlers stormed the bunker. Isn't that perfect? Poetic justice, if you will. Stormed the bunker, confronting security forces and physically attacking Netanyahu's son in a shocking escalation. Now, I haven't got more of the context in this. I'm probably going to look into it tomorrow. What's interesting to me is, one, it could be because they're angry with Netanyahu for tons of reasons, but it just shows you what you get when you radicalize a bunch of lunatics and let them go on people that you don't let, that comes back to you because they're lunatics. These settlers are rabid maniacs, and even Israel's called them out. They're raping and torturing, and I mean literally burning people's homes down with them inside. And so they ended up either wanting the shelter or doing, they took it for themselves, beat them up. It's crazy to me. Now, I'm going to skip past this in general just because I don't wrap up here. The point is, this is a guy on Fox News admitting what we're telling you in other cases, that all of their Iron Dome and that it's not stopping most of the stuff that's coming through, because we've always been telling you that you're being deceived. But on top of that right now the U.S. is not prepared. Like, basically an honest assessment from a retired lieutenant colonel. Oh, by the way, the same rank as a bunch of tech people from Palantir and Meta and OpenAI now have that guy's rank, by the way. Insane. The point is, he's telling you that we're being lied to, that the U.S. is not able to stop these. Iran is not, or Israel is not able to stop these, that we're not ready. A lot of people are being honest about that, but other people lie to you. This Aaron Mate post this one overlooked Trump move that takes on new salience is his ouster of this year of General Charles Brown. He was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In a 2024 interview, if you remember, he signaled that he sought to prevent war with Iran. And she asked him about it, and he said, do you want to go full-scale war with Iran? And they pushed him out. Why? Because he didn't want what they knew was coming. It's all there if you're just honest with yourself, guys. They know what's happening. Now, Defense Minister of Israel says Khamenei, leader, cannot continue to exist. Of course, because that's a rational thing to do, right? You want to cause some, like, if this is like saying we can't deal with this unless Hamas is gone. You're setting a line that you know will lead to war. Because if your argument was, let's have a deal, what if they said, fine, we'll make a deal? Now they're saying, no, we can't, because we can't let him still be there. This is Israel incrementally creating the situation that they want, just like they do everywhere else. Stop being a child out there that are lying about this if you're doing so, and be honest. And if you think you're on Trump's side, then fight for what you thought he wanted at the very least, which is not this. Now, my point is he didn't want this, or rather, what he said he wanted wasn't true. This is confusing. The reality, though, is that they've set this so they made sure this would happen. Now a deal off the table, sort of like the protester activist was telling you in the beginning. If they make a deal, they're going to kill everybody. Funny how these things two work together, right? So one side, they're lying to you, telling you they're going to murder everybody if they make a deal. Over here, Israel's saying, we can't make a deal because we can't allow them to continue. So either way, what's the clear common thread? Israel doesn't want the deal. They want to take over Iran, like they always have. President Trump told Netanyahu to keep going in Iran. Like we told you earlier, just so you saw that coming. Yep, that's where it's going. Keep going, obviously. Well, apparently, we saw Trump say, this was today earlier, he'll decide within 2 weeks. Does anybody take that seriously? What, like they're just going to wait patiently for Trump to, this is clearly a pacification. So what's interesting is as this is happening, this was another point, by the this was actually, I should have showed this first. There's a report that Iran will actually hit a defense system in Israel. And you can see these rockets shooting up in the air. And then this is Grok saying it does appear to be accurate, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes forward. Israel warns of surprises for Iran, which will make the Lebanon pager plot seem simple. So literally openly threatening terrorism. Nothing new there. Now, Seymour Hersh has reported today, in his opinion, that heavy American bombing will begin this weekend. He says, with the aim of deposing the leader. So what you get is Trump trying to pacify. I'll make the 2 weeks. Shut up. Everybody stop looking. And then exactly what even the claim of Trump saying he doesn't want the leader to be attacked. I mean, it's just, if you can't see by now that Trump just gives you nonsense while Iran does, or Israel does what it wants regardless, and then he supports it regardless, then you're not paying attention. It happens every time. He says the White House has signed off on the all-out bombing campaign. So Hirsch is somebody I respect and has a long history. He wrote Samson Option. So I hope he's wrong, but in the past, he doesn't just frivolously throw things out. So the point here is 2 weeks seems to be a way to get you to stop you from looking at what's about to happen. Then, of course, James Lee says, rest assured, the mainstream media wants the people to know, literally the title of the article, no, the USS Nimitz will not be destroyed in a false flag operation. These people are so stupid. It's hilarious to me. Now, my point is the same. The fact that everybody's talking about that and everyone knows to the point where they have to write that article tells me that it's highly unlikely that that's going to be the one. It may be something else if they want to do it still. But now that they wrote that, it might as well just happen anyway. It's just hilarious to me. But the idea that you can never write that, how could you possibly know that, Peter Suchiyu, or however you say that? So you somehow have a crystal ball? Are you trying to pretend, one, that false flags aren't real or they're not possible? Because if you are, then you're a complete moron that has no understanding of history. But if you're arguing that you just somehow know that that's not possible here, how could you possibly know that? Of course it could be. Of course they could do that, right? But no, not according to this mainstream journalist. No, I just think it's hilarious. And that's why he's laughing. Independent journalist and documentary filmmaker James Lee posted, many know Israel mistakenly attacked the USS Liberty, which they do. And it wasn't mistakenly. That's the point they're trying to make right there. Few know it may have, they're citing him in the article, citing him. Few know it may have been part of a CIA Mossad project called Cyanide, with the USS Nimitz heading to Iran. And so their point is, James Lee was wrong. I just find that pretty interesting. But I guess we'll wait and see. If they actually do something with this, maybe that was the point. My gut tells me that was never really the one on the table. And that's why it's being focused on. Do they even need a false flag? They're literally about to go full war. I mean, they're already there. Maybe that was the distraction in and of itself, right? And I'll leave you with this. Carrie Wedler. This is a picture of Charlie Willy Wonka, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, staring through that weird picture of him with his weird eyes. And it says, watching MAGAs realize Trump sold them out to neocons in Israel is expanding the surveillance state and debt and doesn't care about them. And she says, this is a white pill. Shattering the illusion that politicians work for the people and realizing they aren't coming to save us is a rough ride, but is ultimately a huge step toward evolving past the current paradigm of authority, violence, subjugation, and outsourcing your power. I agree. And we'll end with this clip. Now, it's important it's like a music crack over someone speaking. But I do want to point this out before we end with this clip, that it's very important to me that we stress the point that it's not just because, for example, that Israel has been indiscriminately bombing hospitals like a child knows at this point, 36 plus of them in just Gaza. It's not, we should not be then going, therefore we should not be okay, or therefore it should be okay if they do it back. That's not the right mindset to take. Now, you know there's nuance to the conversation, especially about what we just showed you from Israel. But the point is, this clip, without hearing this first, could give you the impression that the argument is because they did it, therefore they can't complain. And I disagree with that, because realize the people of Israel, the people of Iran, the peoples of these countries, they're the ones that take the brunt of this, not the governments that are playing the game. So when this happens, the point, if anybody bombs a hospital, period, should be called out. Now, yes, if there becomes more nuance, it turns out that Israel is using it as a whole. Well, that changes it, doesn't it? But nonetheless, when it happens, it should be addressed, dealt with, called out the same way. And so this clip is important to hear that first, because what it lays out for you is the condemnation of how dare Israel play the victim right now, right? But make sure we understand that what we need is to go in the right direction, not fall in suit with them because they started it. That makes you just as bad as them. So, but I know this, you know this. You're at this show because you already know this, because we want something better. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for helping us fight for that something better. Now, we do this every day. Well, getting back on track to that, but we do this for free. We do this because we believe in it. I mean, at this point, I do this because I believe in it. And I put this out there because I know it matters. And I know that the information is important and shouldn't be behind a paywall. But if you want to see work like this continue and you believe in what we're doing, if you're new to this show and you found this valuable, there's lots of links in the bottom to reach out, to show us your support. $1 a month will change everything, right? Just one more person every time. But overall, just reach out and write me a letter. There's an address down there. Give me a call. Give me some words of encouragement. But whatever it is, just share the content. Share the source material. Do your due diligence. Care about the facts. Thank you for being here today. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
And now that Tehran sent a message back, they're screaming for help like a child who lit the fire and got burned by the flame. Oh, now it's a tragedy. Now you remember what a hospital is. You bombed over 200 hospitals in Gaza. You hit a children's hospital in Iran. You blew up ambulances, dialysis centers, maternity wards. And now you want sympathy? Let me say this loud so the world hears. You didn't just bomb buildings. You didn't just kill civilians. You targeted the ones who were trying to save them. You murdered medics, unarmed, brave, rushing to save a life. And you killed them in cold blood. Then you buried them in their vehicles, like criminals hiding a murder weapon. You didn't just kill people, you erased the proof. You buried mercy under the rubble, and now you ask for compassion. Here's the part that burns deeper. The world has been watching a live stream genocide for 2 years, on every screen, in every language, from every angle. And now, after 2 years of watching you bomb children with American missiles, you expect the people to feel something for you. You got some nerve. You want tears. Tell that to the mothers digging their babies out with bare hands. Tell that to cancer patients gasping for oxygen as the hospital walls collapsed around them. You want sympathy. You had 2 years of global silence, and that still wasn't enough for your bloodlust. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. The world was hoodwinked into believing you were victims while you turned cities into cemeteries. You don't get to cry now. Not after you made mourning a crime in Gaza. You don't get to scream now. Not after you silenced every voice that dared to say enough. You bombed hope. You buried mercy. You murdered truth. And now you want the people's pity. We don't mourn for war criminals. We don't cry for colonizers. We cry for the silence, for the crushed, for the medics you left in the dirt. But something's changed. The world sees you now. The veil is off. The lie is dead.
Up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why?